everyone. I hope everything is good today. I decided that since I have missed a couple streams and I have not really been able to eat solid food for like the last 2 days, we would just do something a little bit chill and different and just relax and read a bit, because I like to read out loud, and unfortunately, like, I wasn't able to a lot as a kid. You know, emotional abuse and all that. But, so I decided that we would just have a chill stream and read a book out loud, and maybe I'd explain some of the historical context behind some things and some of the satirical views behind some things. I'm gonna do Pride and Prejudice because it's a book I'm very familiar with and it's in the public domain, so hopefully that means I will escape any kind of strikes. But if it turns out I can get away with this and maybe get away with some other stuff, maybe I can read some books that are not in the public domain. Those aren't good books in the public domain, I just want to have the full experience. And I like reading out loud, and I know that a lot of people don't have time to read and maybe don't have maybe have dyslexia or have trouble reading, so listening to somebody read can be very helpful for that. It can be very cathartic and therapeutic for that. And also, you know, it's nice to be able to just turn on and maybe read a bit and just have a good time. So that is what I'm going to do. So this is a copy of Pride and Prejudice I have right now. It's really old. I used to go hunting for like really old books. It's got all these like very old kind of cursive type stuff in it. Let's see what the date on this book is. Copyright 1950. So yeah, this book was printed in the 1950s. So it's not that old, but it's still pretty out there. It's an older version. So different versions will have different edits. So if you get something newer, it might not have the same edit as this. Unfortunately, with like public domain works, and this also includes the Bible, like having something that is like, when you have something in the public domain, you can kind of mix some stuff up if you want to cut some stuff out or add some stuff in, or just like play with the placement a little bit. So there is going to be some stuff in here that would be different than like maybe a more modern copy of this. There's a big debate right now in the historical and probably the literature community about like the validity of like removing stuff and like changing stuff in public domain, and like whether or not it's a good or a bad thing to do. It really does seem to depend more on the book and the context of the book than like the actual like work itself, or the actual like it depends on the context, because like a lot of people like in the 50s, they basically rewrote the Bible to include racist and gay stuff that wasn't there before, to try to villainize people of color and people in the LGBTQ plus community. So, it depends on how important the book is, and it also depends on the historical context behind it. So yeah. I know this is not when I usually stream. It's very much not when I usually stream. But I decided that I would just do this. So, we are going to start. So, we're in Pride and Prejudice takes place, you know, think like, not Victorian era, but like in between the Victorian, kind of like Regency type era, that kind of era. More like Regency type. But Jane Austen was a satirical genius, which a lot of people don't really realize. She was very astute in her way of categorizing people. And I'm just going to highlight some of the main players we're going to see in a couple of chapters, and we'll just talk about it. So, during this time period, women were seen more as objects, as you know. They were not really seen as people. They didn't really have any rights. So a woman's status was determined by her husband. So there was a lot of pressure on young girls to marry, and there was a lot of pressure on families to have sons. So the Bennets, who are the primary characters in this novel, they don't have... There is no son in their family. They have 5 girls. this is a problem. So the Bennets are kind of, I would say, a more of a middle class type family. There wasn't really a middle class at the time, but this is what would be considered more like middle class type family. I wouldn't say, yeah, they're very standard middle class. However, due to the time period, having 5 girls is a problem. So there's a lot of pressure to get them married, and there's a lot of pressure not to. And a lot of times people will criticize some of the Bennet sisters for being gold diggers. I'd be very interested to hear people's opinions about that as we go through the story. Yes. So let's get started, and we'll kind of go through some of the stuff here. Alright. Okay, skip through that. I don't need to know that. God damn it, why is the introduction actually longer than the actual chapters? Alright, Pride and Prejudice. Chapter 1. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of some or other of their daughters. So as I said before, women in this time period didn't have any rights, and their only chance of advancement was getting a husband with wealth. So, in order to do that, what Jane Austen is basically saying is, if a wealthy man enters the neighborhood, every single mother is going to be basically throwing their daughters at him in order to hopefully get their daughters a better life, whether or not this single man wants it. So, that's kind of the statement she's making. It doesn't matter if this man is looking for a wife or not. If he has fortune and he's single, every mother in the neighborhood will be throwing their daughters at him. Because otherwise they don't have much of a chance. "My dear Mr. Bennet," his lady said to him one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Miss Long has just been here and she told me all about it." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." This was invitation enough. "Why, my dear, you must know. Miss Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of a large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four to see the place, and was so much delighted with it that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately, that he is to take possession of it before Michaelmas, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of the week. What is his name? Bingley. Is he married or single? Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls." "How so? How can it affect them?" "My dear Mr. Bennet," replied his wife, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying them. Is that his design in settling here?" "Design? Nonsense. How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes." Okay, so here's the deal. Mrs. Bingley, because they have 5 daughters, right? A wealthy man has moved into the neighborhood. She's going to throw her daughters at him. However, she cannot do so because at the time, the only way to be properly introduced to somebody was to have the male of the household introduce the family to another male of the household by visiting and, like, making proper introductions. There was no, like, running on the street talking to people. You had to have the male of the household make proper introductions. So Mrs. Bingley is like, we have 5 daughters. There is a man who just moved into the neighborhood with money who could provide for our 5 daughters. Hello. Hi, love. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Thank you. Yeah, so there's a man in the neighborhood who could provide for the 5 daughters. So Mrs. Bingley is trying to get her husband to go introduce himself so they can be properly introduced so it does not seem scandalous that she is throwing her daughters at him, which it would be scandalous, but everyone's doing it. It's one of those things where, like, if you acknowledge it, it's bad, but if everyone's doing it, they just sort of, right? And Mr. Bennet's true to form is like, he didn't settle here to do that, why are you doing that? But as Jane Austen previously said in the beginning, it's a truth universally acknowledged that if a man of fortune comes in, all the moms are going to throw their daughters at him. Just how it works. So Mrs. Bingley's like, you need to go visit him. We need proper introductions. That's how the world works. Go make a proper introduction. I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will be still better, for you are as handsome as any of them. Mr. Bingley might like you the best of the party. My dear, you flatter me. I certainly have had my share of beauty, but I do not pretend to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over thinking of her own beauty. In such cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of. But my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes to the neighborhood. It is more than I engage for, I assure you. But consider your daughters. Only think of what an establishment it would be for them. Sir William and Lady Lucas are determined to go, merely on that account, for in general, you know, they visit no newcomers. Indeed, if you must go, it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not. You are over-scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you. I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whoever of the girls he chooses, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie. I desire you will do no such thing. Lizzie is not a bit better than the others, and I am sure she is not half so handsome as Jane, nor half as good-natured as Lydia, but you are always giving her the preference. They have none of them to recommend them, replied he. They are silly and ignorant like other girls, but Lizzie is something more of quickness than her sisters. So here's the thing, right? So Mr. Bingley likes to play with his wife a bit because she's very high-strung, and he kind of likes to tire her out. It's sort of a little thing they banter with. So he basically said, oh, you guys are free to go. I don't want to leave the house. You guys are free to go say hi to Mr. Bingley. And Mr. Bingley's basically like, that would be so improper. And he tries to, like, get her to do it by flattering her a bit, saying, oh, you're the prettiest one, you know, he might like you. And Miss Bennet's just like, no, stop it. That's not going to work. And you also see what each of them kind of admires in their daughters. So Mr. Bennet likes Lizzie because she is quick-witted, and is articulate. And Mrs. Bingley likes Jane and Lydia because Jane is very beautiful and Lydia is very good-humored and generally playful and good-natured. They each like different things about their daughters. They have 2 other daughters named Mary and Kitty. Mary rarely shows up in this entire story, and most movies will actually cut Mary because of how little she impacts the story. Kitty shows up a bit more, but a little less. Mary could essentially be cast as a ghost, and nobody would notice. I'm just saying. So, yeah. So, we're kind of introduced to the main players, but also we're kind of getting a glimpse at how Mr. and Mrs. Bennet interact with each other, and what they prefer in their children, and what qualities they kind of admire and seek out. So yeah, it's something to pay attention to. So you'll notice that Mr. Bennet, he is very playful, very sarcastic about it, and his wife is very high-strung and serious. Also, Mr. Bennet does not really seem inclined to leave the house, and this is going to be a running theme. My thing is that Mr. Bennet probably has agoraphobia or some sort of social anxiety disorder, but he's not a very social person, as you will see. So, they have none of them much to recommend him, replied he. They are all silly and ignorant, like other girls, but Lizzie has something more of quickness than her sisters. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves. You mistake me, my dear. I have the highest respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least. Ah, you do not know what I suffer. But I hope you will get over it, and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighborhood. It will be of no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not visit them. Depend upon it, my dear. When there are 20, I will visit them all. Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. So you can kind of see a bit their slightly dysfunctional dynamic here. So 3 and 20 years basically just means they've been married like 23 years. Nice thing about having dyscalculia is that kind of reversal makes sense to me. Yeah, so they've been married like around 23 years, essentially. Is kind of how that is. Yeah. Alright, Chapter 2. Mr. Bennet was among the earliest of those who visited on Mr. Bingley. He had always intended to visit him, though to the last always assuring his wife that he would not. He would not go. Until the evening after the visit was paid, she had no knowledge of it. It was then disclosed in the following manner. Observing his second daughter employed in trimming a hat, he suddenly addressed her with, "I hope Mr. Bingley will like it, Lizzie." "We are not to know what Mr. Bingley likes," said her mother resentfully, "since we are not to visit." "But you forget, mamma," said Elizabeth, "that we shall meet him at the assemblies, and that Miss Long has promised to introduce him. I do not believe Miss Long will do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own. She is a selfish, hypocritical woman. I have no opinion of her." "No more than I," said Mr. Bennet, "and I am glad to find you do not depend on her serving you." Miss Bennet deigned not to make any reply, but, unable to contain herself, she began scolding one of her daughters. "Don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sake. Have a little compassion on my nerves. You tear them to pieces." "Kitty has no discretion in her coughs," said her father. "She times them ill." "I do not cough for my own amusement," replied Kitty, fretfully. "When is your next ball to be, Lizzie? Tomorrow night?" "Ah, it is so," cried her mother, "and Miss Long does not come back till the day before, so it will be impossible for her to introduce him, for she will not know him herself. Then, my dear, you will have the advantage of your friend, and introduce Mr. Bingley to her." "Impossible, Mr. Bennet, impossible. When I am not acquainted with him myself, how can you be so teasing? I honor your circumspection. A fortnight, God damn it, I flubbed that word badly. A fortnight's acquaintance is certainly very little. One cannot know what a man really is by the end of a fortnight, but if we do not venture, somebody else will, and after all, Mr. Long and her nieces must stand their chance, and therefore, as she will think it an act of kindness if you decline the office, I will take it on myself." The girls stared at their father, and Mr. Bennet only said, "Nonsense," Miss Bennet only said, "Nonsense, nonsense." "What can be the meaning of such that emphatic exclamation?" cried he. "Do you consider the forms of introduction, the stress that is laid on them, as nonsense? I cannot quite agree with you there. What say you, Mary? For you are a young lady of deep reflection, I know, and read great books and make extracts." Mary wished to say something sensible, but knew not how. "Hello, Violet!" And the sky was all violets. Hello. Yes. Okay. So, as stated in the beginning of the chapter, Mr. Bennet did visit Mr. Bingley very early on. He just doesn't want to tell his wife. He likes messing with his wife, so he doesn't want to tell her. The main thing that we see in this chapter is Miss Bennet is not very good at containing her emotion, as we see that she scolds Kitty for coughing, which is dumb, because she can't control her coughing. And we see that she's not very good at managing her emotions, and she takes out her stress on her daughters. And we can kind of see how this affects her daughters, with Kitty saying that, trying to stand up for herself and basically just getting dismissed here. So we can kind of see that they maybe don't have the best parenting style. Now, for the time period this is set in, the parenting style isn't that bad, but it still is a form of an emotional abuse to basically take out excess frustration on your children, or on an animal, or anyone in general. That's not like a good way of handling it. So we can see that there's a lot of dysfunction in this household, but it's not very aggressive dysfunction, it's just very passive emotional abuse. So pay attention to that, because that's gonna come into play later. But you can also see that Mr. Bennet is messing with his wife. And Miss Long, and we see again that, like, anybody who has daughters or nieces, as soon as a rich man comes into the neighborhood, they want their family to have a better life, and they want their family to have a higher standing. So they are going to throw their daughters and nieces at this rich man, whether he is interested in being married or not. And that is exactly what Mrs. Bennet is predicting when she says, "I don't want Miss Long to introduce me, because Miss Long has 2 nieces of her own, and will probably not introduce me to have a better chance." So yeah. While Mary is adjusting her ideas, he continued, let us return to Mr. Bingley. I am sick of Mr. Bingley, cried his wife. I am sorry to hear that, but why did you not tell me so before? If I had known much this morning, I certainly would not have called on him. It is very unlucky, but as I have actually paid the visit, we cannot escape the acquaintance now. The astonishment of the ladies was just as he wished, that of Miss Bennet perhaps surpassing the rest, though. When the first tumult of joy was over, she began to declare that it was all what she had expected all the while. How good it was of you, my dear Mr. Bennet! But I knew I should have persuaded you at last. I was sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance. Well, how pleased I am! And it is such a good joke, too. What you should have gone this morning and never said a word about it till now. Now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you choose, said Mr. Bennet. As he spoke, he left the room, fatigued with the raptures of his wife. What an excellent father you have, girl, said she. When the door was shut, I do not know how you will ever make him amends for his kindness, or me either for that matter. At our time of life, it is not pleasant, I can tell you, to be making new acquaintances every day. But for your sakes, we would do anything. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you at the next ball. Oh, said Lydia stoutly, I am not afraid, for though I am the youngest, I am the tallest. The rest of the evening was spent in conjecturing how soon he would return Mr. Bennet's visit, determining when they should ask him to dinner. So essentially, this is another form of dysfunction that takes place in families, which is when Mr. Bennet doesn't tell his wife he went to visit Mr. Bingley for like days, right? And then when he finally says, hey, I actually did visit Mr. Bingley, everything's fine, Miss Bennet immediately forgets about all the other shit and just tries to snowball it away, like it doesn't exist, like it never existed. And that is another sign of dysfunction and abuse. You can imagine that growing up in that kind of environment is probably extremely stressful for the daughters. Because anytime anything would happen, Mrs. Bingley would, as soon as it went away, Mrs. Bingley would just act like it would never happen. So that's an extremely stressful type to grow up in, and it's an extremely stressful type of parent to have, because it makes conflict resolution a very difficult process, and it makes dealing with the outcome of problems extremely difficult. So you just this is something to pay attention to, not just in your life, but also just in the book itself. And it's a very interesting observation that Jane Austen is making and kind of pointing out with the characterization of Miss Bennet. And I feel like that. Also pay attention to how the characters are described. Because Jane Austen never describes physical characteristics of her characters. We do not know what they look like. They could look any which way or form you want them to look. That is all we know. We know that Lydia is tall, but that's about it, right? And we can also still see that Miss Bennet has a preference for Jane and Lydia. She doesn't get mad at Lydia for anything. She explodes at Kitty for something she can't control, which is coughing. But she does seem to have a preference for Lydia. And we see that here where she's like, Lydia, you're the youngest. So Lydia, for reference, is about 15 or 16. That's how old she is. But she is technically out by the standards of the time, meaning that if she were to fall in love, she could still get married at this age. So at this point in time, when they say a girl is out, they mean a girl is able to be married. Someone is able to ask to marry her. Lydia is the youngest, so she does have less of a chance than her older sisters, but she is still out. Now, this is kind of controversial in the Bennet family because what usually happens in society at this time, and the Bennets are middle class, so they would kind of try to emulate upper society. What would usually happen is the younger sisters would not be able to be out and shown in public as someone who could be married or looking for a partner because if the older sisters were not married. But there are 5 of them, so I think Miss Bennet has them all out in order to just have a chance to get one of her daughters a better life, hopefully. You'll see that this book is made up of very flawed individuals who generally aren't bad people. They're just very inherently flawed. Miss Bennet is, to her credit, she does have a lot of issues in her parenting style and the dysfunction in the household, not all of which are her fault, but she is, to her credit, trying to get her daughters a better life than what is going to happen because there's no male heir. So when Mr. Bennet dies, they will all get kicked out of their home. So she's trying to get her daughters married as soon as possible because she's hoping that when they do eventually get kicked out, that her daughters will have a place to live. essentially. Not all that Miss Bennet, however, with the assistance of her 5 daughters, could ask on the subject was sufficient to draw from her husband any satisfactory description of Mr. Bingley. They attacked him in various ways, with barefaced questions, ingenious suppositions, and distant surmises, but he eluded the skill of them all, and they were at last obliged to accept the second-hand intelligence of their neighbour, Lady Lucas. Her report was highly favourable. Sir William had been delighted with him. He was quite young, wonderfully handsome, extremely agreeable, and, to crown the whole, he meant to be at the assembly with a large party. Nothing could be more delightful. To be fond of dancing was a certain step toward falling in love, and the very lively hopes of Mr. Bingley's heart were entertained. "If I can but see one of my daughters happily settled at Netherfield," said Miss Bennet to her husband, "and all the others equally well married, I shall have nothing to wish for." In the few days when Mr. Bingley returned Mr. Bennet's visit, and sat about 10 minutes with him in the library. He had entertained hopes of being admitted to the sight of the young ladies, of whose beauty he had heard much, but he saw only the father. The ladies were somewhat more fortunate, for they had the advantage of ascertaining from an upper window that he wore a blue coat and rode a black horse. An invitation to dinner was soon afterwards dispatched, and already had Miss Bennet planned the courses that were to do credit to her housekeeping, when an answer arrived which deferred it all. Mr. Bingley was obliged to be in town the following day, and consequently unable to accept the honour of their invitation. Miss Bennet was quite discontented. She could not imagine what business he could have in town so soon after his arrival in Hertfordshire, and she began to fear that he might always be flying about the place from one place to another, and never settled at Netherfield as he ought to be. Lady Lucas quieted her fears a little by starting the idea of his being gone to London only to get a large party for the ball, and a report soon followed that Mr. Bingley was to bring 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen with him. "Oh, thank you! Thank you, thank you! Oh, thank you so much! Oh my god, that's amazing! Hi, everyone! Thank you for the book raid! Hello! Aw, thank you! I'm reading Pride and Prejudice, because I wasn't sure about copyright laws, and I want to escape them, and also I'm very knowledgeable, and yeah. Well, I'm a history major, so I also wanted to talk about that. Oh, it's so sweet of you guys to come over! I'm so happy! That's so amazing! Thank you! Oh my god, this is so cool! I know, I love it! The thing is, like, I like Pride and Prejudice because I'm also, like, I have 4 sisters, and I'm the second oldest, so I resonate with Lizzie a little bit more. So, when I was growing up, we didn't really have, like, a TV. Well, we had, like, a TV, but we had, like, a beat-up VCR, and our TV was, like, from the 80s. And we only had, like, 3 movies we were allowed to watch, and one of them was, like, the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice one. So, we watched Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley, like, all the time, and it just, like... Yeah. Oh, cool! Yeah, I have a lot of books in the public domain. I collect, like, antique books, so I have a lot of them. Yeah, the music from that version is great. There's a very old Studio C comedy sketch where they nearly get in a car accident because they're just listening to the music. They're listening to the soundtrack from that movie. So I just grew up, like, rewatching Pride and Prejudice forever and ever and ever, because we had Pride and Prejudice, we had some old VHSs that were, like, from, they were, like, old Scooby-Doo episodes. Like, my mom just went to the thrift store and bought a bunch of stuff that, like, our VCR could run, and that's just what we watched for, like, years. So, like, I don't, yeah, so I watched Pride and Prejudice a lot, I've read it a lot, I've read Anne of of Green Gables, yes, I've read Anne of Green Gables. That was one of the first ones I read. Anne of Green Gables and Pippi Longstocking, like the old Pippi Longstocking books. Yeah. And then my dad used to read the Roald Dahl books and do all the voices. He could, like, do crazy voice acting stuff, and he used to read us all the Roald Dahl books before bed. So they still hold a special place in my heart. Well, we had to get rid of the TV because it was from the 80s and it was massive and we couldn't carry it, so we had to, like, hire people to carry the TV. Yeah, I read my entire school's library when I was a kid, so I've read a lot. Sherlock Holmes is really good too. I like Sherlock Holmes a lot too. Yeah, I like Sherlock Holmes a lot too. I think I like Miss Marple better though. She's like an old lady who like solves crimes, and I just like her a lot better. I like Miss Marple. Different author, but you know, Miss Marple's one of my favorite Agatha Christie characters. She's an old lady who just sits on her porch and solves crimes, and I love it. I mean, hey, if you got a thing for bad boys, Moriarty's up there. Alright, I should really continue. I'm not even, like, to the 3rd chapter. Oh my god, this is amazing. I didn't realize I would be welcomed by the Twitch book group. That's amazing. I need to be more on the Twitch book groups. Y'all are amazing. I need to find my fellow book literature nerds. Oh, Agatha's good. Agatha Christie's really good too. If you like Sherlock Holmes, you're gonna like Agatha Christie. It's got a little bit of a twist on it because she doesn't have like one character. She's got like different characters, but hers are also really good. All right, have fun lurking. Put on a hoodie and lurk. Lurking is acceptable here. Put on your hoodie and lurk. All right. Okay, where was I? Lady Lucas quieted her fears a little by starting the idea of his being gone to London only to get a large party for the ball, and a report soon followed that Mr. Bingley was to bring 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen with him to the assembly. The girls grieved over such a number of ladies, but were comforted the day before the ball by hearing that instead of 12, he brought only 6 with him from London, 5 sisters and a cousin. And when the party entered the assembly room, it consisted of only 5 together, Mr. Bingley, his 2 sisters, and the husband of the eldest, and another man. So here's the thing. Technically, yes, Mr. Bingley brought his cousins. We don't hear about them. We maybe hear about, like, one, but that's about it. Like, you can bring, like, that's information that just doesn't, like, it's existed, but not really. Also, you can kind of see the, like, frenemy vibes already existing between Lady Lucas and Miss Bingley, where Lady Lucas is like, oh, you're nervous? Let me just, like, start a rumor that he's gonna bring back a ton of women. So you can kind of see that they have a very, like, frenemies vibes. It's kind of like, you know, like, they like each other, but they hate each other at the same time. They're gonna try to, like, one-up each other continually. And also, balls at this time, they're not really what we would consider, like, the Cinderella version of balls. They're more like, if you think about, like, a town gathering or a school dance, it's more like a way for, like, the town to get together, have some fun, and just, like, talk shit, basically. Like, it wasn't really like the Cinderella type ball. It was mostly just, like, if you think about your town getting together to, like, watch a movie or have a community event or something like that. It was kind of like that, but, like, with dancing. Like, if your town has, like, a 4th of July parade or something like that, sort of similar. Like, it wasn't really like a, oh, the princess and the ball type thing. No, it was more like, let's all get together and dance and talk shit. Now, this is more like a town gathering. If, like, someone were to actually, like, host, like, a private ball that's not public, that has an invitation list, that's a little more fancier. This is more like anyone's invited who wants to come. That sort of deal. So they call it a ball, but think more like a community event. Mr. Bingley was good-looking and gentlemanlike. He had a pleasant countenance and easy, unaffected manners. His sisters were fine women with an air of decided fashion. Notice no physical characteristics described. Austen is amazing at describing her characters because this is very vague. It mostly describes personality traits rather than physical appearance. And that is one of the very magic things about Jane Austen, is her characters could look any way. She never really describes exactly what they look like, so they could look any which way. And the stereotypes that we have of Jane being a blonde and Lizzie being a brunette or a redhead are all just because of the movies. So when we picture the characters that way, that's because of the movies. But in reality, Jane Austen writes her characters in a way that doesn't have, like, any physical description, which I think is amazing. I think that like, totally widens the field of what these characters could be. And that's very interesting to me as a non-binary person. Yeah. Just something to think about. She kind of revolutionized the way we write characters. Like, this was not a style of character writing before Jane Austen. Before Jane Austen, women were very much described very differently. They were described in more of that pretty innocence-like way with, like, either raven black hair or, like, blonde hair or something like that. They were never just, like, people were never described in this way where we feel we know them intimately, but if we were to pinpoint exactly what they looked like, we wouldn't know. Just food for thought. His brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst, merely looked the gentleman, but his friend Mr. Darcy soon drew the attention of the room by his fine tall person, handsome features, noble mien, and the report in which was in general circulation within 5 minutes after his entrance of his having 10,000 a year. The gentleman pronounced him to be a fine figure of a man, and the ladies declared that he was much handsomer than Mr. Bingley, and he was looked at with great admiration for about half the evening, till his manners gave a disgust which turned the tide of his popularity, for he was discovered to be proud, to be above his company, and above being pleased, and not all his large state in Derbyshire could save him from having the most forbidding, disagreeable countenance, and being unworthy to be compared with his friend. Mr. Bingley had soon made himself acquainted with the principal people in the room. He was lively and unreserved, danced every dance, was angry that the ball closed so early, and talked of giving one himself at Netherfield. Such amiable qualities must speak for themselves. What a contrast between him and his friend. Mr. Darcy danced only once with Miss Hurst and once with Miss Bingley, declined being introduced to any other lady, and spent the rest of the evening in walking about the room, speaking occasionally to one of his own party. His character was decided. He was the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world, and everybody hoped that he would never come there again. Amongst the most violent against him was Miss Bennet, whose dislike of his general behavior was sharpened into particular resentment by his having slighted one of her daughters. Now, if any of you have social anxiety disorder, or are on the spectrum, or are agoraphobic, or have PTSD, or anything like that, Mr. Darcy's behavior is probably a very familiar feeling to you. I'm just gonna say, as somebody who is on the spectrum, and I do have social phobias, and I'm agoraphobic, I have all these issues. If I'm at a party and I don't know people, I'm probably not going to willingly interact with them unless someone interacts with me first. Because I get very nervous and very scared. And I'm very on guard. And it seems like it's possible that Mr. Darcy also struggles with this, and I can confirm that these traits can be taken the wrong way. Sometimes it's taken as me being shy, sometimes it's taken as me being standoffish. I've been told that I look like I'm glaring at everyone all the time, so I kind of see where Mr. Darcy's coming from, but it is possible that some other people don't. And yeah. Miss Bennet, amongst the most violent against him was Miss Bennet, whose dislike of his general behavior was sharpened into particular resentment by his having slighted one of her daughters. Elizabeth Bennet had been obliged, by the scarcity of gentlemen, to sit down for 2 dances, and during part of that time, Mr. Darcy had been standing near enough for her to overhear a conversation between him and Mr. Bingley, who came from the dance for a few minutes to press his friend to join it. "Come, Darcy," said he, "I must have you dance. I hate to see you standing about yourself in this stupid manner. You had much better dance. I certainly shall not. You know how I detest it unless I am particularly acquainted with my partner. At such an assembly as this, it would be insupportable. Your sisters are engaged, and there is not another woman in the room who it would not be a punishment for me to stand up with." "I would not be so fastidious as you are, cried Bingley, for a kingdom, upon my honour. I never met with so many pleasant girls in my life as I had this evening, and there are several of them you see are uncommonly pretty. You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room, said Mr. Darcy, looking at the elder Miss Bennet. Oh, she is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters sitting down just behind you who is very pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you. Which do you mean? And turning around for a moment at Elizabeth, till catching her eye, he withdrew his own and coldly said, She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, and I am no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. You had better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles, for you are wasting your time with me. So essentially, to put this into common speak, Bingley is dancing with Jane, who is very pretty, as established before, and Elizabeth sat down because there's not enough men to dance with the woman, and Elizabeth's trying to do a nice thing and let other women have a turn to dance and have fun in the assembly. So she's sitting down doing a nice thing, and this guy, talking to his friend behind her, basically tells her she's ugly, and he basically calls her ugly, says that standing up with her would look bad because of how ugly she is, and doesn't really want to dance with her because she's slighted by other men, which is not the case at all. And yeah, he basically tells Bingley to go back and enjoy his other partner while he's there and leave him alone. And that's kind of rude. Not gonna lie, that's like if you were at a party and someone behind you just called you ugly and told you that, like, oh, nobody wants to dance with that person because they're awful, like, they look awful. Like, that's mean. So, Miss Bennet, the mother, has heard this and is kind of against Darcy now, because think about it, like, if someone got mad at your kid and called them ugly and said that nobody wanted to be with them, you'd probably be pretty pissed too. Mr. Bingley followed his advice and Mr. Darcy walked off, and Elizabeth remained with no very cordial feelings toward him. Yeah, Mrs. Bennet, oh yeah, very good characterization. I feel like Mrs. Bennet is, what Karens were probably like back in this time. Elizabeth remained with no very cordial feelings towards him. She told the story, however, with great spirits among her friends, for which she had a lively, playful disposition, which delighted in anything ridiculous. The evening altogether passed off pleasantly to the whole family. Miss Bennet had seen her eldest daughter much admired by the Netherfield party. Mr. Bingley had danced with her twice, and she had been distinguished by his sisters. Jane was as much gratified by this as her mother could be, though in a quieter way. Elizabeth felt Jane's pleasure. Mary had heard herself mentioned to Miss Bingley as the most accomplished girl in the neighbourhood, and Catherine and Lydia had been fortunate enough to never be without partners, which was all that they had yet learned to care for at a ball. No, Mr. Darcy is from Pride and Prejudice. Although I haven't read Anne of Green Gables in a really long time, so I'm not sure if there's a similar character. Yeah. Yeah, Kitty and Lydia are very young, so probably being without partners is all that they have to care for. As I said, Lydia and Kitty are kind of around the 16, 15 type mark. Yeah. They returned, therefore, in good spirits to Longbourn, the village where they lived, and of which they were the principal inhabitants. They found Mr. Bennet still up with a book he was regardless of time, and on the present occasion he had a good deal of curiosity as to the event of the evening which he had raised such splendid expectations. He had rather hoped that all his wife's views on the stranger would be disappointed, but he soon found that he had very different story to hear. "Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet," as she entered the room, "we have had a most delightful evening, a most excellent ball. I wish you had been there. Jane was so admired, nothing could be like it. Everybody said how well she looked, and Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful. He danced with her twice. Only think of that, my dear. He actually danced with her twice. She was the only creature in the room that he asked a second time. First of all, he asked Miss Lucas. I was so vexed to see him stand up with her, but, however, he did not admire her at all. Indeed, nobody can, you know. As he seemed quite struck with Jane as she was going down the dance, so he inquired who she was and got introduced, and asked her for the two next. Then the two third, he danced with Miss King, and the two fourth was Maria Lucas, and the two fifth with Jane again, the two sixth with Lizzie, and the Bullianger. If he had any compassion for me, cried her husband impatiently, he would not have danced half so much. For God's sake, say no more of his partners. Oh, that he had sprained his ankle in the first dance. Oh, my dear, continued Miss Bennet, I am quite delighted with him. He is so excessively handsome, and his sister is a charming woman. I never in my life saw anything more elegant than their dresses. I dare say the lace upon Miss Hurst's gown. Here she was interrupted again. Mr. Bennet protested again against any description of finery. She was therefore obliged to seek another branch of the subject, and related with much bitterness of spirit and some exaggeration the shocking rudeness of Mr. Darcy. Oh, but I can assure you, she added, that Lizzie does not lose much by suiting his fancy, for he is a most disagreeable, horrid man, not at all worth pleasing, so high and conceited that there was no enduring him. He walked here, he walked there, fancying himself so great, not handsome enough to dance with. I wish you had been there, dear, to give him one of your set-downs. I quite detest the man. So, Miss Bennet is a lot. To just put that very plainly, she's a lot. And Mr. Bennet was hoping that, all her expectations would be dashed. He was hoping she'd get a dose of reality, where Mr. Bingley would not be the person she wants him to be. Unfortunately, not the case. So, yeah, Miss Bennet's a lot, and, you'll notice that she didn't really seem too observant. She kind of makes judgments very quickly, and this may be a form that she passes on to her daughters, so you might want to pay attention to that. Like, as a parent, her making judgments quickly, she may have taught her daughters to make judgments very quickly. But also, you'll notice that when she describes how good the sisters are, she's kind of describing their gowns, what they're wearing, their money, and not really who they are as people. So she's very fixated with the idea of money. So she's describing how good their gowns look and not really what they are like. When Jane and Elizabeth were alone, the former, who had been cautious in her praise of Mr. Bingley before, expressed to her sister how much she admired him. He is just what a young man ought to be, said she, sensible, good-humoured, lively, and I never saw such happy manners, so much ease, with such perfect good breeding. He is handsome, replied Elizabeth, which a young man ought likewise to be, if he possibly can. His character is thereby complete. I like this little joke here. Because Jane is, like, extolling his virtues, and Elizabeth's also like, well, he's kind of hot, which is fortunate for him. So Elizabeth's basically just telling Jane, yeah, I mean, he's hot, too, which is good. And Jane's not talking about that, but Lizzie's, you know, if you have sisters, or, you know, you have a sibling, and your sibling comes to you and is like, because I have 4 sisters, as I said before, so my siblings will come to me and they'll be like, I'm dating this person, what do you think? Do you think they're hot? Do you think they're attractive? I really like them. And I'm like, I don't know. But also, like, we'll talk about things, and I, being a very chronic asexual, will be like, yeah, this person's really smart and great. And my sister will be like, and they're hot, which is good. I don't, like, okay? But this is a very true thing, and Jane Austen did have sisters, so it's possible they had similar conversations to this. And you'll also notice that Jane is really only talking to Lizzie about this, and that's because if Jane were to be super vocal about this with the rest of the group at this time in history, she could be accused of being a gold digger, or going after a guy just for his money, or kind of being what we would consider a kind of slut today, essentially. Just, I don't really like using that word. I don't like the connotations that word has, but that's kind of how society would view her if she were to start talking about Bingley with everyone she knew. So she's trying to be very quiet in her admiration of him, so people don't think she's like trying too hard to get him. She's trying to still maintain her level of honor because she doesn't really know how this is going to work, but she does like him. I was very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment. Did you not? I did for you, but that is one great difference between us. Compliments always take you by surprise, and me never. What could be more natural than his asking you again? He could not help seeing that you were about 5 times as pretty as every other woman in the room. No thanks to his gallantry for that. Well, he certainly is very agreeable, and I give you leave to like him. You've liked many a stupider person. So this is Lizzie basically saying, he's an okay guy. You've liked dumber people who would lead you down crappier rabbit holes. This guy's probably not gonna do that. And I've also had this conversation with my sisters. It's a very real thing, where your sisters will be like, should I date this person? I'm like, Kate, he willingly calls himself PJ. When a guy willingly chooses the name Pajamas, that is a red flag. That's a real conversation I had with my sister, by the way. Not his biological name. He willingly chose to be called Pajamas. Willingly chose to be called PJ. And I was like, Kate, do not date a guy willingly calling himself Pajamas. That shows a lack of thinking that doesn't go anywhere. Dear Lizzie, oh, you are a great deal apt, to like people in general. You never see a fault in anyone. All the world are good and agreeable in your eyes. I have never heard you speak ill of a human being in my life. I would not wish to be hasty in censuring anyone, but I always speak what I think. I know you do, and that is what makes the wonder. With your good sense, and to be honestly blind to the follies and nonsense of others, affection of candor is common enough, one meets it everywhere, but to be candid without ostentation or design, to take the good of everybody's character and make it still better, and say nothing of the bad belongs to you alone. And so you like this man's sisters too, do you? Their manners are not equal to his. Certainly not at first, but they are very pleasing women when you converse with them. Miss Bingley is to live with her brother and keep his house, and I am much mistaken if we shall not find her a charming neighbor in her. So Jane is a people pleaser. Jane wants people to like her, and she wants to like people, and she really tries her best to please people and to see the good in them. And this may possibly be because Miss Bingley does seem to favor Jane quite a bit, and also it is very probable that Miss Bingley has been training Jane to be this sort of like perfect pretty wife her entire life. So there's a part of Jane that may feel very much like she has to keep this type of thing. I mean, yeah, but this guy wasn't named anything like that. He willingly changed his name to PJ. He changed his name to PJ. He didn't have any former name that was like this. He willingly changed his name to that. Just sit with that for a second. This guy had a name that would not have gotten him bullied, and willingly at age 18 changed it to PJ, changed it to Pajamas. There's a lack of just like forward thinking. To be fair, if your parents name you with the acronym PJ2, there's a lack of forward thinking on their part as well. I realized this when I was a kid, and I was at an Al-Anon meeting, and one of the mothers at the Al-Anon meeting was talking to the other mothers at the Al-Anon meeting, and she specifically said that she named her daughter, I think it was like Haley or Kelsey or something, because it didn't rhyme with other things that would be considered like derogatory or something like that. Like she literally put that much thought into the name. I was like, oh, huh, that makes sense. I don't think I ever met her daughter. I don't think she was ever at the childcare in those meetings. Storm is not pajamas. Storm is cool. I always thought if I had a drag king name, it would be Bridger Storms. I think that's awesome. Al-Anon? Al-Anon is a group for people whose family members are affected by drugs and narcotics. And they go and they kind of work through some of the trauma they've kind of obtained by that. So family members or loved ones who have been affected by drugs and narcotics. So AA is Alcoholics Anonymous. Al-Anon and AA actually run kind of in the same circles because a lot of people with drug and alcohol problems know other people with drug and alcohol problems, and they need a lot of help recovering from that. Because a lot of people with drug and alcohol problems, they can actually be very, like, closed off. Yeah. So Al-Anon is a group for people. It was actually originally founded by the wives of the men who founded AA, but it was a group of women. It was a group of women who founded this thing for, like, people who have been impacted by other people with drug and alcohol problems, or other addiction problems, and kind of working through that and working through some of the behaviors that come from being conditioned to that, because there's a lot of behaviors that you can have from being with family members that have been impacted by drug and alcohol that you don't realize you have. There's a lot of, like, closing off and safeguarding, and Al-Anon's very good at, like, helping you overcome those behavioral patterns that can be actually very damaging for you in the future. Yeah, so that's Al-Anon. I'm very open about some of the things I've gone through because I think that if I'm open about them on stream, it'll help other people feel more comfortable about them and be open about them and be able to confront them themselves and learn about it, because I don't think a lot of people know about this type of stuff. So I'm very open about all the things that I've kind of been through because I want to make sure that it's normalized. Like, we don't kind of shun this stuff. Like, we kind of learn to understand it rather than fear it and shun it. Yeah. But Elizabeth here talking about the sisters is also very fair, because Jane kind of wants to like everyone, has probably been conditioned by Miss Bingley to be this awesome type of wife, and to like everyone, and to be very nice to everyone. So Jane being able to, like, Jane doesn't see a fault in Bingley's sisters because she wants to be a people pleaser. She wants them to like her, and she wants to like them. Lizzie, on the other hand, is a little more critical of Bingley's sisters and notices something that's kind of off with them. But Lizzie is still reserved about it. She doesn't really know because she's just met them. But Lizzie's kind of testing the waters here with Jane. Like, hey, can we talk smack about his sisters, or is it going to be a thing where we aren't talking smack about his sisters? Like, you like this guy, but you have to like his family as well, and if his family isn't good, we should kind of talk smack about them. So she's kind of testing the waters here with Jane, like, who can we kind of talk smack about, like, what's going to kind of happen here. And again, I've been through that with my sisters too. I'm not always good at reading them because they all have mental disorders the same as me, so we sometimes don't always read each other very well. But some of my sisters, we read each other very, very well, and when I'm like, hey, you want to talk smack about this guy's family? We're like, yes, let's do that. This guy's family is insane. Like, my older sister, she's kind of like dating a new guy every 3 months, which is not healthy. But that's her thing, and she'll talk to me about it, and we'll talk smack about family, because my older sister runs in a lot of very rich upper-class circles, and dates a lot of people with crazy, insane parents. Yeah, so I kind of get where they're coming from. This is a very realistic type of way that, like, siblings sometimes interact. Elizabeth listened in silence but was not convinced. Their behavior at the assembly had not been calculated to please in general, and with more quickness of observation and less pliancy of temper than her sister, and with a judgment too unassailed by any attention to herself, she was very little disposed to approve them. They were in fact fine ladies, not deficient in good humour when they were pleased, nor in power of being agreeable when they chose it, but proud and conceited. They were rather handsome, had been educated in one of the finest private seminars in town, had a fortune of £20,000, were in the habit of spending more than they ought, and of associating with people of rank, and were therefore in every respect entitled to think well of themselves and meanly of others. They were of a respectable family in the north of England, a circumstance more deeply impressed on their memories than that of their brother's fortune, and their own had been acquired by trade. This seems like a bot. Hello, bot. Would you like to get lasered? Thank you. I was about to do that. Violet has lasered the bot down for us. Violet has dealt with the bot. Thank you, Violet, for sniping down that. You know you're doing something right when the bots come to your stream. You know you're doing something right when you gotta kill some robots. So Elizabeth is basically saying that she thinks that Bingley sisters are hypocrites because they act like they've been very well off from the start of their life, but Bingley has actually made his money through trade, through business. So Elizabeth is thinking that her siblings are absolute, utter hypocrites. Not her siblings, but that Bingley's siblings are hypocrites because they're acting like they come from old money when in fact they come from like new money. And in the world of wealth, there is a difference. Which I have learned, again, because my sister has dated a new guy every 3 months from the upper rich class. And I have no idea how she manages to do it, but she manages to do it, and it drives me absolutely insane. Okay, live your life, I don't know. But I end up hearing a lot of that. Mr. Bingley inherited property to the amount of nearly £100,000 from his father, who had intended to purchase an estate, but did not live to do it. Mr. Bingley intended it likewise, and sometimes made it his choice of his country. But as he was now provided with a good house and the liberty of a manor, it was doubtful to many of those who best knew the easiness of his temper, whether he might not spend the remainder of his days at Netherfield and leave the next generation to purchase. His sisters were very anxious for his having an estate of his own, but though he was now established only as a tenant, Miss Bingley was by no means unwilling to preside at his table, nor was Miss Hurst, who had married a man of more fashion than fortune, less disposed to consider his house as her home when it suited her. Mr. Bingley had not been of age 2 years when he was tempted by an accidental recommendation to look at Netherfield House. He did look at it, and into it for half an hour, was pleased with the situation and the principal rooms, satisfied with what the owner said in its praise, and took it immediately. Between him and Darcy there was a very steady friendship. In spite of great opposition of character, Bingley was endeared to Darcy by his easiness, openness, and ductility of his temper. Though no disposition could offer a greater contrast to his own, and though with his own he never appeared dissatisfied, on the strength of Darcy's regard, Bingley had the firmest reliance, and of his judgment the highest opinion. In understanding, Darcy was the superior. Bingley was by no means deficient, but Darcy was clever. He was at the same time haughty, reserved, and facetious in his manners, though well-bred, were not inviting. In that respect, his friend had greatly the advantage. Bingley was sure of being liked wherever he appeared. Darcy was continually giving offense. So we kind of get the dynamic right now between Bingley and Darcy. Bingley's the charismatic friend, Darcy's the leader. Darcy makes the plans, Bingley's got the charisma to get it done. I'm sure there is a ton of fan fiction of Bingley and Darcy boning each other. I am not going to look it up because I am asexual and it would do nothing for me. But I am sure there is a ton of fan fiction if that's what you're into. Not dissing that. Smut writers gotta get paid. And, you know, if that's what you're into, that's what you're into. That's cool. I really hope there's some good art, though. Good art makes it better. I'm just waiting for my Discord to get flooded with, like, pictures of Bingley and Darcy in a relationship now. I'm sure it's just gonna happen. But yeah, like, and this is this dynamic actually makes sense to me. Like, it's one of those on the surface where it doesn't make sense, but good friends balance each other out. Good friends and good partners balance each other out. Like, they've got stuff that balances them out. So Bingley and Darcy are really good friends. And Darcy is clever and can get shit done. But Bingley's charismatic enough to get Darcy invited back to things. And Bingley probably gets Darcy out of his shell a little bit. Darcy seems like he's got some social anxiety issues. And it seems like Bingley's very good at getting Darcy to get out of his shell and to, like, explore the world, which is probably very healthy for Darcy. So there's definitely a very good dynamic here, with maybe some issues of how reliant Bingley is on Darcy, but I also think that Darcy is probably more reliant on Bingley than he maybe realizes. But this very good friendships balance each other out. Group friendships, very good group friendships, will also balance each other out. Yes, I have a Discord. It's in my link. It's in my Twitch link. If it doesn't work, let me know, and I will pin it in the comments. Yeah, I have a Discord. I have an Instagram. Feel free to follow me there. I'm trying to, like, branch out in the content I do. So I usually do, like, Final Fantasy XIV game content, but I'm trying to branch out, and I really like reading out loud. And I wasn't allowed to do it as a kid. I used to get yelled at if I tried to read out loud as a kid. So I kind of want to read out loud, and I need some, like, low-key stuff I can do because I've been in a lot of pain these past couple days because I have nerve damage stuff. But, like, so I want something low-key I could do, and I figured I like to read, so I might as well read. I figured it would be nice. So, yes, all that stuff should be in my Twitch description. You're welcome to join, to flood it, do whatever you want. If you want to post pictures of Darcy and Bingley boning, go ahead. I mean, I post a lot of cute animal pictures and videos of, like, dogs that need homes. A lot of gay stuff. Etc. Yeah, feel free. I'll set up, like, a book. I'll set up a book channel. If this is gonna be a recurring thing, probably, where I just kind of, like, get on in the evening and I read a bit. So I'll set up a book channel in my Discord because I'm trying to, like, branch out. Is it empty, really? Twitch is so weird. I have had... Oh, Violet just posted the... Violet, thank you, Violet. Violet posted the Discord invite. I thought it wasn't empty. Why is it empty on Twitch? I definitely filled it out on Twitch. I don't really know why it's empty. I'm gonna have to go back and fix that. Twitch has been kind of weird with, like, keeping my stuff up. I don't know if it's, like, a glitch or what. Yeah. I also have a YouTube channel where I make music videos and, like, post past streams. Wonderful. I did share info. I did share links and all of that stuff on Twitch. So I'm going to have to fix that. I don't know why it redid that. That's fun. Yeah, I'll fix that after this. Violet posted the Discord. I'll fix all that stuff on my Twitch later. Twitch does this sometimes. We have just managed to get a stable Discord link, and I'm using stable kind of like this, because Twitch likes to axe my info, and I don't know if it's a glitch. I should probably contact somebody, but social anxiety says no, so we will see how that goes. I don't really like calling people on the phone. It's funny, because I've done a lot of things that most people find very socially anxiety-inducing. But calling someone on the phone is like, ah! It's not logistical in the slightest, which is very annoying to me. Yeah. I did share info, but it's very possible it got taken down. Again. The manner in which they spoke of the Merrington Assembly was sufficiently characteristic. Bingley had never met with anyone with pleasanter people or prettier girls in his life. Everybody had been the most kind and attentive to him. There had been no formality, no stiffness. He had soon felt acquainted with all the room. And as to Miss Bennet, he could not conceive an angel more beautiful. Darcy, on the contrary, had seen a collection of people with whom there was little beauty and no fashion, for none of whom he had felt the smallest interest, and from none received either attention or pleasure. Miss Bennet he acknowledged to be pretty, but she smiled too much. Miss Hurst and her sister allowed it to be so, but they still admired her and liked her and pronounced her to be a sweet girl and one whom they should not object to know more of. Miss Bennet was therefore established a sweet girl, and their brother felt authorized by such commendation to think of her as he chose. So Bingley's basically asking for their opinion of Jane. He's like, hey, I like this chick. I don't know how guys talk. He's like, hey, I like this chick. I don't know how straight guys talk, okay? I know how gay guys talk. He's like, hey, I like this chick. And, he's like, what do you think of this chick? And, Darcy's like, she smiles a lot, but she's okay. And his sisters are like, yeah, she seems nice. And he's like, cool. I don't know how straight men talk. I only know how straight men talk when they're trying to flirt with me, which is not ideal, because I have a girlfriend, so they're just not in luck. Yeah, they always call me Bridge for some reason. Like, that's not my name. I don't know why. It's weird. I don't actually like bridges. I really hate bridges. I live near the Golden Gate Bridge and I ain't walking across that shit. That shit is dangerous. You've been on the Oakland Bay Bridge? That shit's terrifying. Richmond San Rafael Bridge? Terrifying. There's not even a walkway there. It's just straight in the water. Oh my god, and when it storms, the water like comes right up to the bridge. It's terrifying. Like, no, I don't want that. Fucking hate bridges. Like, I'm better about it now. When I was a kid, I used to have like full-on panic attacks going across some of those. I used to have to train myself to look just straight, and like I would have to take deep breaths, and I would like cross my fingers so that I wouldn't have a panic attack. Yeah. I don't want to be called a bridge. I don't like them. I don't know why guys who try to flirt with me always call me that. That's like the go-to that I know that they're going to start flirting with me, where they'd immediately call me that. I'm like, I did not authorize this. Did I authorize this? No. Oh my god. One guy slid into my DMs and asked how many holes I had. I told them they were rude and gave them a polite but firm virtual slap. I told him, you don't do that. That's a rude thing to ask. Unless you are seriously dating someone, that's a rude thing to ask. But if you're just sliding to someone's DMs, fuck no. Being in the resource system my entire life has trained me for this. I've gotten very good at dispelling people's beliefs. Okay. Within a short walk of Longbourn lived a family with whom the Bennets were particularly intimate. Sir William Lucas had been formerly in trade in Meryton, where he had made a tolerable fortune and risen to the honor of knighthood by an address to the king. During his mayoralty, the distinction had perhaps been felt too strongly. It had given him a disgust to his business and to his residence in a small market town, and quitting them both, he had removed with his family to a house about a mile from Meryton, denominated from that period Lucas Lodge, where he could think with pleasure of his own importance and, unshackled by business, occupy himself solely in being civil to all the world. For though elated by his rank, it did not render him superlicious. Oh my god, that word is hard to say. I know what it means, I just can't say it. On the contrary. Oh, thank you, Book Brews and Booze. I hope you have an amazing night. Stay safe and eat cake, because the more you weigh, the harder you are to kidnap. It was very sweet of you guys. I appreciate it a lot. On the contrary, he was all attention to everybody. By nature inoffensive, friendly, and obliging, his presentation at St. James had made him courteous. Well, mini candy bars are good. Next time get some cake or pudding. I'm a big believer that adults should be able to eat pudding without any problems. Adults should be able to eat pudding. I will stand by that. I will die on this hill. Adults should be able to eat pudding without the stereotypes of it getting to them. Those are a good name for cats. I had a dog that was toothless. Fun experience. She didn't know she was toothless. She would take on the world if it let her. It's a miracle she did not get killed by a large dog, but most of them were like, oh my god, this tiny dog's insane. She's a toy terrier mix, and she was kind of like a cat dog. She's like 10 pounds, but we have like 2 pit bull type dogs, and she would like terrorize them to hell and back. My giant pit bull, she's actually sleeping behind me. I don't know if you can really see her, but she's sleeping like behind me over here with the rainbow collar. She was scared of little dogs and like cats and like other animals like that for like half the year because this little dog with no teeth just like going at her. Lady Lucas was a very good kind of woman, not too clever to be a valuable neighbor to Miss Bennet. They had several children. The eldest of them, a sensible, intelligent young woman, about 27, was Elizabeth's intimate friend. That the Miss Lucas and the Miss Bennet should meet to talk over the ball was absolutely necessary, and the morning after the assembly brought the former to Longbourn to hear and to communicate. You began the evening well, Charlotte. Charlotte's amazing, by the way. We stand Charlotte, said Miss Bennet, with civil self-command to Miss Lucas. You were Mr. Bingley's first choice. Yes, but he seemed to like his second better. Oh, you mean Jane, I suppose. Because he danced with her twice. To be sure, that did seem as if he admired her. Indeed, I rather believe he did. I heard something about it, but I hardly know what. Something about Mr. Robinson? Perhaps you mean that I overheard something between him and Mr. Robinson. Did I not mention it to you? Mr. Robinson asking him how he liked our Meryton assemblies, and whether he did not think there were a great many pretty women in the room, and which he thought the prettiest, and his answering immediately to the last question, oh, the eldest Miss Bennet, beyond a doubt. There cannot be 2 opinions upon that point. Upon my word! Well, that was very decided indeed, and that does seem but however, it may all come to nothing, you know. My overhearings were more to the purpose than yours, Eliza, said Charlotte. Mr. Darcy is not so well worth listening to as his friend, is he? Poor Eliza, to be only just tolerable. I beg you would not put it into Lizzie's head to be vexed by his ill treatment, for he is a disagreeable man, but it would be quite a misfortune to be liked by him. Miss Long told me about that last night, that he sat close to her for half an hour without opening his lips. Are you quite sure, ma'am? Is there not a little mistake? Said Jane. I certainly saw Mr. Darcy speaking to her. Aye, because she asked him how he liked Netherfield, and he could not help answering her, but she said he seemed very angry about being spoke to. Miss Bingley told me, said Jane, that he never speaks much unless among his most intimate acquaintances. With them he is remarkably agreeable. I do not believe a word of it, my dear. If he had been so very agreeable, he would have talked to Miss Long, but I guess how it is, everybody says that he is eat up with pride, and I dare say he had somehow heard that Miss Long does not keep a carriage, and it comes to the ball in a hack chaise. I do not mind his not talking to Miss Long, said Miss Lucas, but I wish he had danced with Eliza. Another time, Lizzie, said her mother. I would not dance with him if I were you. Believe me, ma'am, I may safely promise you never to dance with him. His pride, said Miss Lucas, does not offend me so much as pride often does, because there is an excuse for it. One cannot wonder that so very fine a young man, with family, fortune, everything in his favor, should think highly of himself. If I may so express it, he has a right to be proud. That is very true, replied Elizabeth, and I could easily forgive his pride had he not mortified mine. So, Charlotte's making a good observation here, which is Darcy has a reason to be proud. He's got a lot of money, a big estate, comes from a very wealthy family, has been born into nobility. He has a reason to think highly of himself. Society has given him that reason to think highly of himself. He has a lot of power in society, and he has that reason. Charlotte's correct, and Lizzie's like, yeah, I would forgive him, but he mortified my pride. It made the whole town think I was intolerable by his, thing, so, I don't want to deal with that. Yeah. So Charlotte is being a very keen observationalist here. Again, we stand Charlotte. Charlotte is cool. Charlotte and Lizzie should have gone off and lived in a cabin together and become old spinsters. That was being my headcanon. I want to see Charlotte and Lizzie fanfic. There's got to be an avenue of Charlotte and Lizzie fanfic. Okay? Charlotte and Lizzie should have just ditched this whole thing and gone off in a cabin and lived together. Just saying. Pride, observed Mary, who piqued herself upon the solidity of her reflections, is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I have ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed, and that human nature is particularly prone to it, and there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or another, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are different things, so the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us. That's a great way of saying nothing, Mary. Here's what I don't like, okay? I took a class with a kid like this, and it annoyed the fuck out of me, right? I'm a history major, okay? I've read a lot in my life, and I'm obsessed with history, particularly like Cold War, World War II stuff, okay? I took a class with this kid who was very adept at saying things that meant nothing, but just in a tone of voice that sounded very insightful. Like they were making some groundbreaking discovery and the teachers ate it up. And of course it was like a straight white guy, right? Which, again, I don't have any issue with. I only have an issue when they're douchebags, which this guy was. And so, like, I would say something that comes from facts. And this guy would just spout off nonsense, but in a strangely inspirational voice, and everybody would just fall at his feet. And I'd be like, no, that's bullshit. This is why I'm never good with authority figures. This is why I'm Aw, thank you, Inuyasha Nero. Oh, your name is so much fun to say. Inuyasha Nero. It's so much fun to say. Yeah, like, I would just be like, this guy was intolerable to do a class with. Like, it was a very intolerable history class. I was just like, oh my god, this guy literally said nothing. Or this guy literally just repeated what the teacher said, but in a voice that sounded very, yeah, I hate people like that too. I was like, I did the work, okay? I did the reading and the work, and this guy just shouts out bullshit, but like in a public speaking voice, and everyone just falls at his feet, and I'm like, oh my god. This is kind of what Mary's doing. I mean, Mary... Whose body do you need? I don't think I kept going with that class, but like, yeah, like, but Mary is kind of making a point with the vanity and pride thing, but they weren't really talking about the vanity and pride thing. Mary's trying to sound a little more insightful than she is, and I think it's more because Mary's like the middle child and she's trying to stand out, that she's like trying to be like, because Mary is told to be that she's super accomplished, you know, she can do everything really well, and my sister, who is a middle child, is very similar to Mary in this aspect. She's very quiet and reserved, and she doesn't like to get into conflict, but she tries ultra hard to be the perfectionist and to try to stand out because she has all these giant personalities around her. It's the same with my youngest sister too. Again, I have 4 sisters. It's a very similar situation to this book, and my middle sister is the same way. It's very hard to stand out, and the middle child is often the peacekeeper. They're have the 2 younger ones who are kind of crazy and the 2 older ones who, you know, had to deal with all the faulty mistakes their parents made. So, like, they tend to be the more reserved, like, let's just keep the peace one, but they also are a lot of times the sheltered one. So, yeah. Oh my god, that is terrible. I hate it when people do that. I might know this guy you're talking about. I was running does he play Final Fantasy? I don't know if you know. Because I was running a dungeon of Final Fantasy, and one guy sent me like 5 paragraphs of critiques of what I was doing. And it took up the entire chat box. We might know the same guy. I've also had, yeah, like, I'm non-binary as well, and I dress very feminine, right? So people get confused, which is dumb. But it happens. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, like, like, trying to figure out what some people are saying is hard. I usually just send it over to my therapist. I'm like, can you make sense of this? Like, just fair warning, if anyone sends me anything... Yeah, maybe. Maybe we know the same guy. It's been a while since that's happened to me, but maybe we know the same guy. Yeah, like, just fair warning, if anybody ever sends me anything, like, overly complicated like that, my therapist will see it. And my therapist will psychoanalyze it. Because my therapist, like me, will probably be trying to figure out what the fuck it is about. So, if you don't want to be psychoanalyzed by my therapist, don't send me that shit! Like... Yeah, it sucks. I used to, so I grew up in the resource system, and I was one of the only, like, femme persons there. It was mainly a kind of male-dominated space. And I used to get notes passed to me that were, like, wanting to date notes, but they were all very cringy, and it was very clear that they didn't actually really know me. I was just one of the only, like, very feminine people. So I got passed all these notes that were like, hey, go out with me. And I lived in an area of town, like 45 minutes away. Because the area I live in, the school district decided I just wasn't going to make it here and they sent me away. But like, school district gave up on me very early into my resource career. But yeah, like, so I'm used to that kind of energy and I'm used to dealing with it. But it's not fun to deal with. But yeah, my therapist will psychoanalyze everything that I get. So if you do not want my therapist to psychoanalyze something like that, don't send me shit like that. Yeah. If I were as rich as Mr. Darcy, cried a young Lucas, who came with his sisters, I should not care how proud I was. I would keep a pack of foxhounds and drink a bottle of wine every day. Then you would drink a great deal more than you ought, said Miss Bennet, and if I were to see you at it, I should take away your bottle directly. The boy protested that he should not, and she continued to declare that she would, and the argument ended only with the visit. This is a sign of adult incompetence. So this is a young kid, right? This is a child who's saying this, okay? And instead of handling it maturely, Miss Bennet decides she's going to get into an argument with this literal child about a future that's probably not going to happen. And the argument only ends when they leave. That is not the sign of a mature adult. That is the sign of an adult with some issues. And that is not a good way to parent. Like, I'm a parentified kid, okay? My parents were incompetent. I had to take care of my younger sisters. I had to take care of my older sister. I spent a lot of time holding shit together by glue, okay? Like, I know these things, and I've also had to deal with this myself, where parents and adults will argue with you about the stupidest shit for hours and hours and hours instead of being mature about it. This is not a healthy response to the situation, and it's a very small, tiny thing about Miss Bennet, but I feel like it deserves to be highlighted because you'll see kind of the way her daughters act, and her husband acts, and her family acts, and it's just another level of the dysfunction that this family is going through. And for the time, this is probably not that bad of a dysfunction. But the fact that Miss Bennet is basically the, Regency era of a Karen is very obvious here. And it's just like a little thing I just kind of want to highlight because it's very in-depth for her character. The ladies of Longbourn soon waited on those of Netherfield. The visit was soon returned in due form. Miss Bennet's pleasing manners grew on the goodwill of Miss Hurst and Miss Bingley, and though the mother was found to be intolerable and the younger sisters not worth speaking to, a wish of being better acquainted with them was expressed towards the two eldest. By Jane, this attention was received with the greatest pleasure, but Elizabeth still saw superciliousness, I cannot say that word, just like scummy behavior, in their treatment of everybody, hardly accepting even her sister, and could not like them, though their kindness to Jane, such as it was, had a value as arising in all probability from the influence of their brother's admiration. It was generally evident whenever they met that he did admire her, and to her it was equally evident that Jane was yielding to the preference which she had begun to entertain for him from the first, and was in a way to be very much in love. but she considered with pleasure that it was not likely to be discovered by the world in general, since Jane, united with great strength of feeling, a composure of temper, and a uniform cheerfulness of manner, which would guard her from the suspicious of the impertinent. She mentioned this to her friend Miss Lucas. "It may perhaps be pleasant," replied Charlotte, "to be able to impose on the public in such a case, but it is sometimes a disadvantage to be so very guarded. If a woman conceals her affection with the same skill from the object of it, she may lose the opportunity of fixing him, and it will then be but poor consolation to believe the world equally in the dark. There is so much of gratitude or vanity in almost every attachment that it is not safe to leave any to itself. We can all begin freely. A slight preference is natural enough. But there are very few of us who have heart enough to be really in love without encouragement. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better show more affection than she feels. Bingley likes her sister, undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on." So, this is the thing. Women in this time had to be very careful with how they showed affection, because they did not want to be labeled, poorly. They did not want to be labeled as, again, I don't like to use this word, but like a slut, or like a gold digger, or like somebody who's trying to fix a man. But Charlotte is saying that Bingley likes Jane, but, very few of us can find love without encouraging it to happen. You don't just fall in love. You have to work very hard to maintain that love and to maintain that relationship. And if you don't work very hard to maintain that, you're gonna lose it. And Charlotte's basically saying Jane and Bingley like each other, but Jane's being so guarded because she's worried about what society is going to think of her that Bingley might not get the hint. Like, Bingley might not see it. So Jane should move fast to snap Bingley up. Jane should give him some encouragement and just move fast to get him. And Elizabeth is saying, but if she does that, she's gonna get, she's gonna get a bad reputation, which could ruin her. And Charlotte's saying, like, not if Bingley likes her. If Bingley likes her, he'll marry her and it'll be fine. Like, this is essentially the thing. And this was just something every woman had to deal with in that time. When they liked a guy, or a guy liked them, they had to deal with, how do I show affection without ruining my reputation? Essentially, because it's very easy for a woman to be labeled, again, hate using this word, like a slut, or like a gold digger, or like someone who wants this. So Charlotte and Lizzie are debating this. Lizzie says that Jane is basically encouraging Bingley, that Jane's doing well, but Charlotte's saying Jane could be doing more. Essentially. Charlotte is a very insightful character, and I feel like she and Lizzie work very well together, and again, they should have moved into a cabin, and this whole story should have been a lesbian love novel. But, doesn't happen. But she does help him on, as much as her nature will allow. If I can perceive her regard for him, he must be a simpleton indeed not to discover it too. Remember, Eliza, that he does not know Jane's disposition as you do. But if a woman is partial to a man and does not endeavor to conceal it, he must find out. Perhaps he must, if he sees enough of her. But though Bingley and Jane meet tolerably often, it is never for many hours together, and they always rarely see each other in large mixed parties. It is impossible that every moment should be employed in conversing together. Jane should therefore make the most of every half hour in which she can command his attention. When she is secure of him, there will be leisure for falling in love as much as she chooses. Your plan is a good one, replied Elizabeth, if nothing is in question but the desire of being well married. And if I were determined to get a rich husband, or any husband, I dare say I should adopt it. But these are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design. As yet, she cannot be certain of the degree of her own regard, nor of its reasonableness. She has known him only a fortnight, danced 4 dances with him at Meryton. She saw him one morning at his own house, and has since dined in his company with him 4 times. This is not quite enough to make her understand his character. Not as you represent it. Had she merely dined with him, she might only have discovered whether he had a good appetite, but you must remember that 4 evenings have been also spent together, and 4 evenings may do a great deal. Yes, but these 4 evenings have enabled them to ascertain that they both like Vinga better than Commerce. But with respect to any other leading characteristic, I do not imagine that much has been unfold. Well, said Charlotte, I wish Jane success with all my heart, and if she were married to him tomorrow, I should think she has a good chance of happiness, as if she were to be studying his character for a 12-month. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the disposition of the parties were ever so well known to each other, or ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their felicity in the least. They always continue to grow sufficiently, unlike afterwards, to have their share of vexation, and it is better to know as little as possible to the defects of the person to whom you are to pass your life. Charlotte has a very nihilistic view of marriage. This may be because Charlotte is kind of reaching the end of her kind of, I think we would say more like debutante type style of run. That's not really a thing here, but like she's 27, which is kind of older for or she's around 27, which is older, and she hasn't been married yet, which is a problem for her. And Charlotte has a more nihilistic view of marriage. Marriage is like roulette in Charlotte's eyes, yes. So Lizzie is saying Jane wants love. Jane's doing this out of love. She's not doing this to get a husband. She doesn't need to snatch Mr. Bingley up. She likes him. She wants to love him. She hasn't known him for very long. She wants to fall in love with him, you know? And Lizzie's like, if I can see it, Mr. Bingley will surely too see it. And Charlotte's like, remember, Mr. Bingley hasn't known Jane all his life. He doesn't know Jane's little interesting quirks. Jane should be making the most of her time with him. They don't meet one-on-one. They meet in group settings, and they don't get to talk to each other alone. And Charlotte's saying Jane should be making the most of her time with him, and if she really likes him, you know, giving him encouragement and snapping him up. And Lizzie's like, but Jane isn't in a rush to get a husband. She wants to do this for love, and if Jane were in a rush to get a husband, that would be a very good way to get a husband very quickly. And Lizzie's like, if I wanted to get a rich husband, I'd probably follow your plan, Charlotte. And Charlotte's basically saying happiness in marriage is a matter of chance. And at this point in history for women, it very much was. Because a lot of women didn't really get a say in who they married, and barely knew the people they got married with because it was very improper to be alone with a gentleman for a long period of time. She's kind of just wondering if she loves him. Jane likes him a lot, but she doesn't know him that well. So she very much likes him, but she's not sure if she loves him because she just doesn't really know him. So she's being very guarded because she doesn't want the public to think she's throwing herself at him. She doesn't want to gain a bad reputation, so she's trying to be very guarded with her love for Bingley. She has a crush on him, but she doesn't know how long it's going to go or if Bingley's going to reciprocate those feelings. It's a very dicey situation for her. And she can't be alone with him because that would be scandalous. So she doesn't really get to know him that well. It's very hard to know him. But Charlotte's essentially saying Jane should move fast, you know? If Jane really likes him, she should just move fast and not worry about loving him or not. Because in this life, and how women are in this life, they don't get a lot of options. And Bingley's a good option. And Jane should just snatch him up while the good option is there and presenting itself. You know, he's rich, he's well off, Jane should snatch him up. And so Lizzie and Charlotte are kind of arguing about this, because Lizzie thinks Jane should marry for love, and Charlotte's saying the reality we live in is that's not always the optimal way of life. And Bingley and Jane, you know, like, they seem like a good match now. They should just go forward now. And if they're happy, they're happy. If they're not happy, they're not happy, but at least Jane's made a good match, you know? Charlotte's very much a realist about the situation that they're in, where Lizzie's a little more of a romantic about the situation they're in. Charlotte's a little bit more like, hey, we are not men. We don't have the same power and the same status that men have, and we have to make sure we get good matches so we aren't, you know, thrown to the curb or whatever. And yeah, Charlotte's very much being a realist about this. And that's kind of, and Lizzie's very much being more of a romantic about it. You make me laugh, Charlotte, but it is not sound. You know it is not sound, and that you would never act this way yourself. Occupied in observing Mr. Bingley's attentions to her sister, Elizabeth was far from suspecting that she herself was becoming an object of some interest in the eyes of his friend. Mr. Darcy had at first scarcely allowed her to be pretty. He had looked at her without admiration at the ball, but when they next met he looked at her only to criticize. But no sooner had he made it clear to himself and his friends that she hardly had a good feature in her face, than he began to find it was rendered uncommonly intelligent by the beautiful expression of her dark eyes. To this discovery succeeded some others equally mortifying. Though he had detected with a critical eye more than one failure of perfect symmetry in her form, he was forced to acknowledge her figure to be light and pleasing, and in spite of his ascertaining that her manners were not those of the fashionable world, he was caught by their easy playfulness. Of this she was perfectly unaware. To her, he was only a man who made himself agreeable nowhere, and who had not thought her handsome enough to dance with. He began to wish to know more of her, and, as a step towards conversing with her himself, attended to her conversation with others. His doing so drew her notice. It was at Sir William Lucas's, where a large party were assembled. "What does Mr. Darcy mean," said she to Charlotte, "by listening to my conversation with Colonel Forrester?" "That is a question which Mr. Darcy only can answer. But if he does it any more, I shall certainly let him know I see what he is about. He has a very satirical eye, and if I do not begin by being impertinent myself, I shall soon grow afraid of him." On his approaching them soon afterwards, though without seeming to have any intention of speaking, Miss Lucas defied her friend to mention such a subject to him, which immediately provoking Elizabeth to do it. She turned to him and said, "Did you not think, Mr. Darcy, that I expressed myself uncommonly well just now, when I was teasing Colonel Forrester to give a ball at Meryton? With great energy, but it is a subject which always makes a lady energetic. You are severe on us. It will be her turn soon to be teased," said Miss Lucas. "I am going to open the instrument, Eliza, and you know what follows. You are a very strange creature by way of friend, always wanting me to play and sing before anybody and everybody. If my vanity had taken a musical turn, you would have been invaluable, but as it is, I would really rather not sit down before those who must be in the habit of hearing the very best performers." On Miss Lucas's persevering, however, she added, "Very well, if it must be so, it must," and gravely glancing at Mr. Darcy, "There is a fine old saying, which everybody here is of course familiar with, 'Keep your breath to cool your porridge, and I shall keep mine to swell my song.'" Her performance was pleasing, though by no means capital, after a song or two, and before she could reply to the entreaties of several that she would sing again, she was eagerly succeeded at the instrument by her sister Mary, who, having in consequence of being the only plain one in the family, worked hard for knowledge and accomplishments, and was always impatient for display. Mary had neither genius nor taste, and though vanity had given her application, it had given her likewise a pedantic air and conceited manner, which would have injured a higher degree of excellence than she had reached. Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had been listened to with much more pleasure, although not playing half so well, and Mary, at the end of a long concerto, was glad to purchase praise and gratitude by Scotch and Irish airs at the request of her younger sisters, who, with some of the Lucases and 2 or 3 of the officers, joined eagerly in dancing at the end of the room. So, Darcy's starting to like Elizabeth, but he's not really sure how to go about it, and Elizabeth isn't the type of woman he's supposed to marry. Elizabeth is much more lower class than him, and that's kind of a taboo in this setting. And so he's doing something I'm very familiar with, because I've done it myself and I've seen it happen, which is when you are socially awkward and you don't really know how to talk to someone, so you just start sitting in and watching conversations they have with other people. And this is something I've seen a lot of people with social anxiety do, or a lot of guarded people do, who just don't really know how to have a conversation with other people or how to interact. Maple, do you want to come over here? I saw her getting up, but she doesn't seem very keen. But yeah, it's something I'm very familiar with, because I've been in the resource system my whole life and I've seen this happen. You don't really know how to talk to somebody, so you just kind of sit in their conversations and see what they like and what they don't like and how they behave and if they're okay to approach. And yeah, that's what Darcy's doing, and unfortunately, it's kind of creepy. Like, this is kind of creepy behavior. Like, unfortunately, this reads as creepy. Like, people find this to be creepy. And Elizabeth is kind of calling him out on that and saying, hey, that kind of sitting around and just watching us but not actually talking and not intending to talk is kind of strange behavior. Yeah. I used to do that a lot too. And, like, I'm cool with it now if I see someone doing it because I kind of know where it comes from. Like, and I try to make sure that they feel included and that they feel safe and that it's okay. But a lot of people who are not super knowledgeable about that would not really understand why it happens. And Lizzie probably hasn't experienced this. She's lived in a very small town, and while she's managed to kind of get around that town, she doesn't really have a lot of experience with a vast majority of people. So it's very possible she doesn't really understand this, and Darcy kind of looks like he's glaring all the time, which doesn't really help him. And as somebody who also looks like they're glaring all the time, it hasn't really helped me either. The difference is Darcy's a big guy, or like, he's a guy, right? And like, I'm 97 pounds and short, so there's a big difference. But yes, I completely, yeah, it does seem a lot safer, right? Like, it is safer to get to know people and to observe people before you actually spend time talking to people. Like, I get why Darcy's doing it, but like, the people who live in this small town haven't really experienced a lot of that. They all know each other. So Darcy doing this is probably very offsetting to Elizabeth, and she also thinks Darcy doesn't like her. Darcy basically was very mean to her, and she doesn't understand why he's standing around her when he was so mean to her. So in her eyes, Darcy couldn't like her. He called her unhandsome. He slighted her in front of everybody. He was very mean to her. Why would he be spending time with her? Yeah, it's a very confusing situation for kind of everyone involved. And neither Darcy or Elizabeth is very playful, but she's not super great when it comes to like serious communication. And Darcy's also not great when it comes to serious communication. So it's not as if they could like actually talk. And Darcy's also confused because he's not supposed to like someone of Elizabeth's status. And the fact that he likes someone of Elizabeth's status and he thinks that she looks nice is very mortifying to him, because that could impact his chances and his reputation. So he's very concerned about that, and he probably, like, let's be real, he's probably kind of on the spectrum, to be honest, or has social anxiety or something, because, like, and again, I can relate as somebody who's kind of on the spectrum and has social anxiety. Like, I'm not putting him down for that, I'm just being realistic. There were people back then who were like that too, and they existed too, and Jane Austen probably interacted with them too, and she's probably writing from experience. Like, people like that existed then too. People like us existed back then too. So. But basically what, Mary, it says, Mary's the middle child. She's not as pretty as her sisters, or stands out by personality as her sisters. So she's worked to be a perfectionist, but that's not as entertaining as someone like Elizabeth, who's very playful and very self-aware of her mistakes. So Elizabeth plays the piano, and she knows she's not doing a great job, but she's at least having fun with it, And Mary gets on there and is so serious about doing the best job that it's no longer fun, it's no longer entertaining to watch. So her sisters are like, yay, you did a good job, now play something we can dance to. Essentially, yes. Oh, I have a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel where I post like music videos of like things I made in game. I can link it right now if you want. I don't know if a mod has it on hand, but I could probably link it. It would be, I can actually probably just yeah, hang on. Discord. Yeah, I know, right? Now play something we can dance to. Yeah, I feel it. Yep. Where is, okay. Oh, did I not post? I think I posted my Kim Possible. Hang on a second. I don't want to get copyright. Okay. Okay, this is my most recent one. I don't want to get copyright. No, it's like a music channel. Okay, here we go. This is one of my most recent one I did. I did it to like the Kim Possible theme song. It's pretty cool. I have a whole playlist of them. I'm currently working on some of them with some of the people that come to my stream. Maple, do you want to come say hi? You could come say hi. You want to come say hi, Maple? No? Okay. She's being a glorified rug. I was gonna see if she wanted to come say hi because she's very cute. But... yeah, I post all my streams and all my stuff to YouTube. So, and then I have some like other stuff there that I've done in the past. Yeah. Yes, the whole now play something we can dance to. Yeah. All right. Mr. Darcy stood near them in silent indignation at such a mode of passing the evening, to the exclusion of all the conversation, and was too much engrossed by his thoughts to perceive that Sir William Lucas was his neighbour. Still, Sir William Lucas thus began. What a charming amusement for young people in this, Mr. Darcy. There is nothing like dancing, after all. I consider it as one of the first refinements of polished society. Certainly, sir. It has the advantage of also being in vogue amongst the less polished societies of the world. Every savage can dance. Sir William only smiled. Your friend performs delightfully, he continued after a pause, on seeing Bingley join the group, and I doubt not that you are adept in the science yourself, Mr. Darcy. You saw me dance at Meryton, I believe, sir. Yes, indeed, and I received no inconsiderable pleasure from the sight. Do you often dance at St. James? Never, sir. Do you not think it would be a proper compliment to the place? It is a compliment which I would never pay to any place if I can avoid it. You have a house in town, I conclude? Mr. Darcy bowed. I had some thoughts of fixing in town myself, for I am fond of superior society, but I did not feel quite certain that the air of London would agree with Lady Lucas. He paused in hopes of an answer, but his companion was not disposed to make any. And Elizabeth at that instant moving towards them, he was struck with the action of doing a very gallant thing, called out to her, My dear Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner. Side note, I picture Sir William Lucas kind of looking like the Monopoly Man. I don't know if that makes this encounter any more entertaining, but that's just kind of what's going through my brain right now. Thank you for saying it's a cool video. I worked very hard on it. The editing was very clenching my asshole. I also feel Darcy's pain here, being in a conversation he doesn't want to be in. My dear Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner. You cannot refuse to dance, I am sure, when so much beauty is before you. And, taking her hand, he would have given it to Mr. Darcy, who, though extremely surprised, was not unwilling to receive it, when she instantly drew back, and said with some discomposure to Sir William, Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreat you not to suppose that I move this way in order to beg for a partner. Mr. Darcy, with grave propriety, requested to be allowed the honour of her hand, but in vain. Elizabeth was determined, nor did Sir William at all shake her purpose by his attempt at persuasion. You excel so much in the dance, Miss Eliza, that it is cruel to deny me the happiness of seeing you. And though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he can have no objection, I'm sure, to oblige us for 1/2 an hour. Mr. Darcy is all politeness, said Elizabeth, smiling. He is indeed, but considering the inducement, my dear Miss Eliza, we cannot wonder at his complaisance, for who would object to such a partner? Elizabeth looked archly and turned away. Her resistance had not injured her with the gentleman. He was thinking of her with some complacency, and when thus accosted by Miss Bingley. I can guess the subject of your reverie. I should imagine not. You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in this manner, in such society, and indeed I am quite of your opinion. I was never more annoyed. The insipidity, and yet the noise and the nothingness, and yet the self-importance of all those people. What would I give to hear your strictures on them? Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you. My mind was more agreeably engaged. I have been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow. Miss Bingley immediately fixed her eyes on his face, and desired he would tell her what lady had the credit of inspiring such reflections. Mr. Darcy replied with great intrepidity, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. You want to come up there? You want to come up and say hi? Come up. You can come up and say hi. Do you want to come? Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Come on. You can do it. Come on. You just say, come on. Come up and say hi. You can do it. Come here. Here. You got this. You got this. You got this. Come up. Good job. Good job. Good bear cub. Good bear cub. Oh, hi. Yes. Hello. Thank you. You smell like rosemary. Were you in the rosemary bushes? You smell like rosemary. Good bear cub. Yes, you're doing so well. You want to lick my book? You gonna lick okay. Okay. Good bear cub. He's in training to be my service dog, so this is kind of like deep pressure therapy. We do this sometimes. He has to go for endurance, though. He hasn't gone for endurance in a while. Are you trying to tuck your nose in my armpit? What are you doing? Oh, good job, bear cub. Good job, bear. Good job. You're doing so good. Do you want to hang up here? We can hang up here. You just saying hi? You just checking in? You telling me my blood sugar's low? I know. I know it is. Yeah. Oh, good bear cub. Yes. Yes, that's my ear. Thank you. You don't really fit. Okay. You don't really fit there. Yes, there's an armchair there. Do you want to get off? What do you want to do? Okay, you getting off? Okay. Oh, don't bother me. Oh, good job. Okay, he's going to sleep on the beanbag behind me. We've had, the neighborhood cats, not our cats, but, like, the neighborhood cats, like, in the area have been having a turf war these past couple days. I have not gotten sufficient sleep because we will wake up in the middle of the night to just them. Oh, no, so I have adrenaline processing disorder, but I also just have, like, a bunch of nerve damage. So I have a lot of, like, nerve damage physical issues, so I don't have diabetes. I don't need, like, insulin or anything. But yeah, he can kind of sense when my blood sugar's low. I don't know, we're still trying to figure out if he can sense when my blood sugar's low, or he's just reacting to my adrenaline. But, so I've been in a lot of nerve pain this past week because I just have a lot of ongoing nerve damage, like, especially in my face. So I haven't really been able to eat solid food, so I've been eating a lot of, like, non-Newtonious food, so, like, a lot of soup, oatmeal, pudding, ice cream, just a lot of non-Newtonious foods that, like, go through my system pretty easily, don't irritate my nerve damage too much, just, like, stuff like that. So, that's kind of why I'm doing this stream kind of this evening, just to have, like, a chill time to just kind of relax into it. And so he's in training to be my service dog for mostly, like, PTSD and, like, spectrum stuff. But, yeah, we think he can tell when my blood sugar's low, but we're not entirely sure yet. Like, it's not 100% thing yet. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with that. But yes, it is, like, I'm probably a little low on blood sugar because I haven't been able to really eat solid foods these past couple days. So yeah, that's probably a thing that's going on. But it's hard to tell if he can actually tell, or if he's just trying to get me to, like, just, like, in between liquid and solid form. I'm trying to get some solids in there. I was able to eat, like lentil soup the other day, so that was good. But yeah, like, it's a cool word. Yeah, non-Newtonious fluid. It basically means ice cream or anything, like, in between liquid and solid. So think, like, pudding, Jell-O. Jell-O's a really good example of a non-Newtonious fluid. I don't really like eating Jell-O, but it is a good example. Yeah, pudding, all that stuff. So, like, yeah. So I have, like, a lot of ongoing nerve damage, and it's gonna get worse as I get older. That's just the reality of life for me. And, like, I'm kind of lucky, actually. There's, my other family members have it a lot worse than I do. So, but yeah. So he's not really in training for that, but we're not really sure yet if that's a thing he can do or not. I kind of think it might be a thing he can do, but I'm not entirely sure. Like, he's still young. He's still, like, 10 months old, so he's still really early into his training. So we're still kind of learning little things about him, but he's very good at detecting my adrenaline as well. So, yeah, it's kind of, we're still kind of watching it to see if he can really detect my blood sugar, or if he's just checking in on me. He's still very young. We got him when he was like 6 months old, 7 months old. We weren't really sure. He was adopted, so yeah. But he's in training. Then we have Maple over here. She's kind of like a retired therapy dog. Doesn't really do service work, but she's definitely built for like therapy work. She was an owner surrender. We got her, but she's very sweet and she's very tolerant of Bear. She should not be as tolerant as she is of him. He's very much a dumb puppy. And I say that endearingly. Miss Bingley immediately fixed her eyes on his face and desired that he would tell her what lady had the credit of inspiring such reflections. Mr. Darcy replied with great intrepidity, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Miss Elizabeth Bennet, repeated Miss Bingley. I am all astonishment. How long has she been such a favourite? And pray, when am I to wish you joy? That is exactly the question which I expected you to ask. A lady's imagination is very rapid, and it jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony in a moment. I knew you would be wishing me joy. Nay, if you are serious about it, I shall consider the matters absolutely settled. You will have a charming mother-in-law indeed, and of course she will always be at Pemberley with you. He listened to her with perfect indifference while she chose to entertain herself in this manner, and as his composer convinced her that all was safe, her wit flowed long. So, Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley's sister, is unmarried and very much into Mr. Darcy. And she's basically making fun of Elizabeth's family. Like, oh, if you were to marry Elizabeth, you'd inherit all that family dysfunction. And, she was like, basically making fun of it. Like, you're not gonna marry this girl. Like, yeah, you like her, but come on, look at me. I actually have, like, status and I'm better or something. Yeah. So, she's basically just gonna make fun of the Bennets while Mr. Darcy's thinking. Because she's into Mr. Darcy, and she thinks that if she puts down the girl he's into, he'll fall in love with her. And that doesn't work. Unfortunately. I know from observational experience that it doesn't work. It just makes you look like the asshole. Which is what Miss Bingley is going to end up looking like, the asshole. Mr. Bennet's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of $2,000 a year, which, unfortunately for his daughters, was entailed in default of male heirs on a distant relation, and their mother's fortune, though ample for her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficiency of his. Her father had been an attorney in Meryton, and had left her £4,000. She had a sister married to a Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk to their father. What are you doing? Okay, build a nest. I thought he was tearing up the beanbag. No, he's just building a nest behind me. She had a sister married to a Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk to their father and succeeded him in the business, and a brother settled in London in a respectable line of trade. The village of Longbourn was only 1 mile from Meryton, a most convenient distance for the young ladies, who were usually tempted thither there 3 or 4 times a week, to pay their duty to their aunt and to a milliner's shop just over the way. The 2 youngest of the family, Catherine and Lydia, were particularly frequent in these attentions. Their minds were more vacant than their sisters', and when nothing better offered, a walk to Meryton was necessary to amuse their morning hours, and to furnish conversation for the evening. And however bare of news the country in general might be, they always contrived to learn some from their aunt. At present, indeed, they were well supplied both with news and happiness by the recent arrival of a militia regiment in the neighborhood, and it was to remain the whole winter. Meryton was the headquarters. Their visits to Miss Phillips were now productive of the most interesting intelligence. Every day added something to their knowledge of the officers' names and connections. Their lodgings were not long a secret, and at length they began to know the officers themselves. Mr. Phillips visited them all, and this opened to his nieces a source of felicity unknown before. They could talk of nothing but officers, and Mr. Bingley's large fortune, the mention of which gave animation to their mother, was worthless in their eyes when opposed to the regimentals of an ensign. After listening one morning to their effusions of this subject, Mr. Bennet coolly observed, "From all that I can collect by your manner of talking, you two must be the silliest girls in the country. I have suspected it from some time, but now I am convinced." Catherine was disconcerted and made no answer, but Lydia, with perfect indifference, continued to express her admiration of Captain Carter, and her hope of seeing him in the course of the day, as he was going the next morning to London. "I am astonished, my dear," said Miss Bennet, "that you would be so ready to think of your own children as silly. If I wish to think slightingly of anybody's children, it should not be my own, however. If my children are silly, I must hope to always be sensible of it. Yes, but as it happens, they are all of them very clever. This is the only point, I flatter on myself, on which we do not agree. I had hoped that our sentiments coincided in every particular, but I must so far differ from you as to think of our two youngest daughters uncommonly foolish. My dear Mr. Bennet, you must not expect such girls to have the sense of their father and mother. When they get to our age, I dare say they will not think about officers any more than we do. I remember the time when I liked a red coat myself very well, and indeed, so do I still at my heart. And if a smart young colonel, with 5,000 or 6,000 a year, should want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him. And I thought Colonel Forster looked very becoming the other night at Sir William in his regimentals." "Mamma," cried Lydia, "my aunt says that Colonel Forster and Captain Carter do not go so often to Miss Watson's as they did when they first came. She sees them now very often standing in Clark's library." Miss Bennet was prevented replying by the entrance of a footman with a note from Miss Bennet. It came from Netherfield, and the servant waited for an answer. So, basically, I don't know if you've all ever lived in a town. I don't live in a town, personally, where there's, like, an officer base or anything like that. The town I live in is inherently flawed, and the mountain biking team at the local high school is seen as the greatest thing ever. But if you've lived in a town where, like, soldiers come home, or, like, there's, like, a military installation and everyone comes back and they have, like, you know, like, their fleet weeks, or everybody's on vacation or on leave at that point in time, you know, this is kind of like that. Like, the militia has moved into the area, and that is a bunch of young men, and Catherine and Lydia, who are, again, like, 16 and 15, that's very enticing to them. And you also see Mr. Bennet and Miss Bennet and how they kind of approach it. Mr. Bennet is of the opinion that if his children are being stupid, he should know about it. I kind of agree with that. If in the unlikely event I ever have kids, but in the unlikely event I ever had kids, I want to know if they're being dumb and I need to correct them. I have pets, and I get to know my pets very well, and I know if they're being dumb. I correct them if they're being bad. I'm not going to say my pet is perfect, because nobody's perfect, and we can always strive to be better. And I'm not going to say I'm perfect, because I'm not. I'm very flawed. But, like, if I have an animal, like, and something happens, I need to know my animal very well so that I know how they're going to respond to something. For instance, Maple over here, she's 10. She's very arthritic. She doesn't realize how arthritic she was. We go to a dog park, she sees dogs playing, she gets a little handsy because she's big and not very agile. So she needs to be with senior dogs a lot of the time when she's out on a walk with other dogs. Now at home, it's a little different because she schools the puppy, and the puppy needs schooling, and they love each other very much, and they snuggle with each other. But if she goes and sees dogs she doesn't know, they need to be a certain temperament, otherwise she's going to wear herself out, and she's going to scare some other people. Also, I really can't take her to dog parks because she's a pit bull, and people yell at me the moment they see me, and it's a problem. Like, she hasn't even gotten in the dog park, and they're already like, you can't have that dog here, and there's no rule saying I can't have that, it's just, like, snotty people's opinions. Bear's actually, like, half pit bull, but he doesn't look like it, so they allow him in the dog park. But yeah, like, Maple's very tolerant, too. But, like, that's the thing, like, if my animals have a problem, I want to know about it, so that I can school them and get better about it. Bear has an issue where he tries to nip other dogs' legs. He tries to herd other dogs. That's not a good thing to have. He has an issue, he's a puppy, he tries to pull other dogs' collars. It's a very dangerous thing to have, so I train him for it. I train him to stop doing that. I get after him on it. I make sure he's listening to me about it, you know? When you have kids or an animal, and I'm not saying those are the same things because they are not the same thing, as a parentified kid who had to take care of 3 younger sisters, they are definitely not taking, like, taking care of a human is different than taking care of an animal. But, like, I know I'm talking about you, and I'm not being nice. I'm sorry. But, like, it's not the same thing. But Miss Bennett is also saying, like, you know, they're young. They're gonna be a little bit foolish, you know? When they're our age, they won't be as foolish. And Miss Bennett also has a point here. Like, Kitty and Lydia, again, are 15 and 16. They're gonna have, like... Yeah, it really does suck. Yeah. And also, I think it has to do with the fact that different types of dogs have different play styles. And bully breed dogs like pit bulls and, you know, even like Frenchies can have this play style. And like boxers and stuff. They tend to be a bit handsy with their paws. And a lot of people get scared about that. And the reality is it's not actually that scary. But that's just kind of how they play. But a lot of people who are not used to watching dogs play in that style of play with their paws like that get very afraid. So that's the other thing. Like, they're playing, they're not having an issue. But people who are not used to watching that, like Bear and Maple, my two guys, they look like elephant seals. They literally pull their teeth back and then they just kind of smash their mouths into each other like that. They look like elephant seals. Have you ever seen elephant seals like raise their mouths and go like, these two kind of look like that. Like, and to somebody who doesn't know them, that looks scary, but they're not actually biting each other. They're just kind of just like shoving their mouths into it's weird. Like, they just, I'll take a video of it sometime because it's very strange. But like, people who don't know, like my grandparents have a little dog, they've never seen that, so they think it's aggressive, and I'm like, no, they're just sitting on the floor like it. I honestly, like, but yeah, it really sucks. But I mean, it's good to be aware if your animal has problems, and it's good to train your animal for those problems and to anticipate that, and to not just think your animal's perfect the way it is or make excuses for them. Because yeah, I've gone through trauma. I rescue animals that have gone through trauma. I used to work for a crazy-ass horse trainer, and I used to work with wild horses or abused horses that have gone through trauma. And you can give them some leniency because they've been through trauma, but you still have to school them, and you still have to correct them, and you still have to provide structure. And as somebody who has PTSD and has gone through hell and back multiple times, like, yeah, I need structure too. If I don't have that structure, or if I don't get after myself sometimes, I'm just never gonna get shit done. Like, there's, like, yes, it's good to be understanding of trauma, but it's also still good to give someone enough structure so that they can build above that trauma. They can not like escape it, but just like work with it while working on other stuff. So yeah, like, I get it when people say, oh yeah, like they're a little weirded out by dogs because they were in this situation. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, I'll take my dog because your dog's clearly not okay with my dog, and I'll just move to the outside dog park. The dog park that I'm talking about in question here is a literal football field that got converted into a dog park. It's massive. It was a football field, and now it's a dog park. So it's a massive dog park. If you're on the other side of this dog park, there's a good chance you're not, like, meeting with anyone. But yeah, like, even when I was working with horses, I tried to be aware of that. I was like, hey, please don't do that around this horse because this horse is going to freak out. Or this horse will try to bite your horse. Or, like, something like that. Like, I'm very aware of how my pets are. So this is just a very good conversation in general that these two are having, where it's like, Mr. Bennett's like, I want to be aware my kids are stupid. And Miss Bennett's like, you know, they're young. They can be a little stupid because they're young. And yeah, my dog is 10 months old. He's gonna do stupid shit. I don't always like it, but I understand it. Oh, no, you're fine. You are fine. This is actually, I'm really liking our conversation, actually. I'm really enjoying our conversation. You're fine. No, you're totally fine. There's no pressure to talk in chat, too. I will talk to myself for hours, so you're fine. I've spent a lot of time alone in life, so I'm very adept at talking to myself. No, you're fine. I'm enjoying this. I am. I like talking to other people, and you know, the book's always here. This is always gonna be here. I ain't losing this book. I have like several copies of this book. We ain't losing our place, so the book's always here. We can spend time talking. Miss Bennet was prevented from replying by the entrance of the footman with a note for Miss Bennet. It came from Netherfield, and the servant waited for an answer. Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled with pleasure as she eagerly calling out while her daughter read. Well, Jane, who's it from? What is it about? What does he say? Well, Jane, make haste, tell us, my love. It is from Miss Bingley, said Jane, and then she read aloud. Dear friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine today with Louisa and me, we shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives, for a whole day's tea-to-tea between two women can never end without a quarrel. Come as soon as you can on the receipt of this. My brother and the gentlemen are to dine with the officers. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley. With the officers, cried Lydia. I wonder my aunt did not tell us of that. Dining out, said Mrs. Bennet. That is very unlucky. Can I have the carriage, said Jane. No, my dear, you had better go on horseback, because it seems likely to rain, and then you must stay all night. That would be a good scheme, said Elizabeth, if you were sure that they would not offer to send her home. Oh, but the gentlemen will have Mr. Bingley's chaise to go to Meryton, and the Hurst will have no horses to theirs. I'd much rather go in the coach. But, my dear, your father cannot spare the horses, I am sure. They are wanted in the farm. Mr. Bennet, are they not? They are wanted in the farm much oftener than I can get them. But if you have got them today, said Elizabeth, my mother's purpose will be answered. She did at last extort from her father an acknowledgment that the horses were engaged. Jane was therefore obliged to go on horseback, and her mother attended her to the door with many cheerful prognoses of a bad day. Her hopes were answered. Jane had not been gone for long before it rained hard. Her sisters were uneasy for her, but her mother was delighted. The rain continued the whole evening without intermission. Jane certainly could not come back. This was a lucky idea of mine indeed, said Miss Bennet, more than once, as if the credit of making it rain were all her own. Till the next morning, however, she was not aware of all the felicity of her contrivance. Breakfast was scarcely over when a servant from Netherfield brought the following note for Elizabeth. My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which, I suppose, is to be imputed upon to my getting wet through yesterday. My kind friends will not hear of my returning home till I am better. They insist also on my seeing Mr. Jones, therefore do not be alarmed should you hear of his having been to me. And, excepting a sore throat and a headache, there is not much the matter with me. Yours, etc. Well, my dear, said Mr. Bennet, when Elizabeth had read the note aloud, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness, if she should die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley, and under your orders. Oh, I am not afraid of her dying. People do not die of trifling colds. She will be taken care of. As long as she stays there, it is all very well. I would go and see her if I could have the carriage. Elizabeth, feeling really anxious, was determined to go to her, though the carriage was not to be had, and she was no horsewoman. Walking was her only alternative. She declared her resolution. So, Miss Bingley, or Miss Bennet, has decided to send Jane in a storm on horseback, hoping she'll get sick because the officers aren't there, and Miss Bennet wants to throw her at Mr. Bingley. This use of her daughter in this way is not healthy, and is probably very demeaning to Jane. Like, it seems like a lot of Jane's, openness and good-naturedness is a lot of repression on her part. It's very possible her mother has done similar schemes to all of them during this, and, imagine, yeah, that's gotta suck, right? Your parent intentionally making you sick because you are only worthy to her as a pawn to get married. That's gotta be very demeaning, and a lot of Jane's composure and stuff is probably just her pushing all of that down. She's probably just repressing a lot of that, and trying to make her mother happy in the hopes that, yeah. So, Jane does this thing knowing full well it's probably not gonna... Yeah, I've been in the same place. Dysfunctional parents, you know. Yeah, she wants to give her daughter ammonia in order for her to spend more time at Bingley's estate. Because if Jane were to just go over there and meet with Caroline and Miss Hurst, she would never see Mr. Bingley. And Miss Bennet doesn't want that. She wants Jane to get married, so she's going to go get Jane sick, so she has to stay there. And yeah, I've been used as a pawn as well in family endeavors. My family's also very dysfunctional, which is another reason I relate to this a lot. Not for, anything love related. My mother has been a single parent for most of her life and has been celibate for most of her life, and she does not really care about that stuff. But I've been used as a pawn for many things in many different situations. And yeah, it sucks. It feels scummy, it feels worthless, it is horrible. Yeah. I mean, my dad, it was a little different. My dad was more emotionally aware than my mom, my stepmom were. But my dad died when I was really young, so it's a little different. Like, yeah, it does suck. It's hard to break out of. And that stays with you, too. Like, that's the thing. It stays with you. Like, people don't realize how much it stays with you and affects you over the years of your life. And it's just, like, something, it's like, there's a lot of, like, bad habits I've had to untrain myself with. Yeah. There's a lot of, like, bad habits I've had to untrain myself with because when I was a kid, I just thought that was the way of life, you know? Like, your family does this stuff, and everyone's family does stuff. And then you get older and you realize that's not the way of life. And then you get to be 18 and you realize, oh, I have freedom and autonomy now that I didn't have before. And I'm disabled, so I have to rely on my parents still. And it's a lot better now. It's a lot better now. My mom's in therapy. It's a lot better, you know. But, you know, growing up, it was very difficult. And I do have to untrain myself a lot with that. And there's still moments where, like, I have these moments and I'm like, oh, yeah, freedom sucks also. Freedom, right? You know? Especially the current state of the U.S. right now. Yeah, so it's, you know, but yeah, there's just a lot of behavior sometimes you have to untrain that you realize, oh, I do that because of this, and that's not healthy, and I should maybe catch myself before I do that. Yeah, and I've worked very hard to, like, untrain, you know, a lot of my behaviors, but it's hard, and Jane probably is suffering from a lot of repression because this is probably not the first time her mother's done that. And I think part of the thing that keeps Jane sane is you can kind of tell through Jane and Lizzie's relationship that they are the two oldest taking care of their younger sisters when their parents aren't, and that they have a very close bond, and probably the thing that keeps them sane is each other. They lean on each other quite a bit, and it's probably what keeps them sane, and I can relate to that. I didn't lean on my older sister a lot, because my older sister was a really hard act to follow. But when we were together, we did have to take care of our younger sisters. And it might just be me, like, identifying with the book, and maybe somebody else reads this, has a different interpretation. That's fine. That's how books are meant to be read. You know, you're free to disagree with me at any time through any of these opinions. But, you know, yeah, like, it's very possible, because Lizzie's determined to go see Jane and make sure Jane's okay when her own parents put her up to this. So it's very, very possible that, like, Lizzie and Jane are each other's support system. And they have to work together to get through these types of situations. And Lizzie's gonna make sure Jane gets through this, and she wants to see for herself, because she knows Jane, right? Jane's very open-minded. She's a people pleaser. Jane's gonna say exactly what her mother likes to say. Yep, they're subjective. You're free to disagree with me on any of this. Also free to flood my Discord with, I don't know, gay porn. I don't care. I'm asexual. I'm not gonna care. If you got fan fiction of Darcy and Bingley or Lizzie and Catherine, feel free. But, yeah. Books are subjective. You can take what you want from them. This is just kind of my interpretation based on my life experiences. And I just kind of want to show how in-depth Jane Austen was as a writer. Because this feels like someone very insightful, writing a family. I mean, she's Elizabeth and Eliza. Here's the problem with the Lizzie. Yeah, Lizzie might not be her real name, because this book is reprinted in the 1950s. But the story's been around for a while. And because Lizzie goes through several different names in the thing, like, it's very possible her original name was Eliza, or, like, she's called Elizabeth Eliza. So it's very possible that, like, the reprints have kind of, she was called Lizzie at some point, and they just kind of standardized that as it became more known. That's the thing with books. It's a big thing with the Bible, where in the 1950s someone paid someone in the Bible to kind of rewrite things so it was more homophobic and more racist, so that the people using the Bible to justify their homophobia and racism could still go through with it. But yeah, like, it happens all the time in books over the years. So this is from the 1950s. I found it at a used book place. I go hunting for like antique books. So I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books that like are really old that I go hunting for. But yeah, this one's from the 1950s. It's one of my favorite ones. I have another smaller one that's also from the 1950s. It's more like a pocket book. Yeah, where is it? Yeah, copyright 1950s, Harper's and Brother, printed in the United States of America. Yeah, so this was printed in the 1950s, essentially. Yeah, so I have a lot of antique books. And I try to make sure that, like, I'm very aware of the fact that, like, a lot of these things have been changed as time goes on. And they're going to continue changing as time goes on. So the copy I am reading might be slightly different than a copy someone buys today that was reprinted in 2022. That's just how it is. The farther back you go, the kind of more accurate it gets, but it just gets a little muddy. So, yeah. Well, my dear, said Mr. Bennet when Elizabeth had read the note aloud, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness, if she should die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders. Oh, we already went there. Okay. Elizabeth, feeling very anxious, was determined to go to her. Though the carriage was not to be had, and she was no horsewoman, walking was her only alternative. She declared her resolution. How can you be so silly, cried her mother, as to think of such a thing in all this dirt? You will not be fit to be seen when you get there. I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want. If this is a hint to me, Lizzie, said her father, to send for the horses. No, indeed. I do not wish to avoid the walk. The distance is nothing when one has motive. Only 3 miles. I shall be back by dinner. I admire the activity of your benevolence, observed Mary, but every impulse of feeling should be guided by reason, and in my opinion, exertion should always be in proportion to what is required. We will go as far as Meryton with you, said Catherine and Lydia. Elizabeth accepted their company, and the 3 young ladies set off together. If we make haste, said Lydia, as they walked along, perhaps we may see something of Captain Carter before he goes. In Meryton they parted. The 2 youngest repaired to the lodgings of one of the officers' wives, and Elizabeth continued her walk alone, crossing field after field at a quick pace, jumping over stiles and springing over puddles with impatient activity, and finding herself at last within view of the house, with very weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing with the warmth of exercise. She was shown into the breakfast parlor, where all but Jane were assembled, and where her appearance created a great deal of surprise. That she should have walked 3 miles so early in the day, in such dirty weather, and by herself was almost incredible to Miss Hurst and Miss Bingley, and Elizabeth was convinced that they held her in contempt for it. She was received, however, very politely by them, and in her brother's manners there was something better than politeness. There was good humour and kindness. Mr. Darcy said very little, and Mr. Hurst nothing at all. The former was divided between admiration of the brilliancy which exercise had given to her complexion, and doubt as to the occasions justifying her coming so far alone. The latter was thinking only of his breakfast. Her inquiries after her sister were not favourably answered. Miss Bennet had slept ill, and though up, was very feverish and not well enough to leave her room. Elizabeth was glad to be taken to her immediately, and Jane, who had only been withheld by the fear of giving alarm or inconvenience from expressing in her note how much she longed for such a visit, was delighted at her entrance. She was not equal, however, to much conversation, and when Miss Bingley left them together, could attempt little besides expression of gratitude for the extraordinary kindness she was treated with. Elizabeth silently attended her. When breakfast was over, they were joined by the sisters, and Elizabeth began to like them herself when she saw how much affection and solicitude they showed for Jane. The apothecary came, and having examined his patient, said that, as might be supposed, she had caught a violent cold, and that they must endeavour to get the better of it, advised her to return to bed, and promised her some draughts. The advice was followed readily, for the feverish symptoms increased, and her head ached acutely. Elizabeth did not quit her room for a moment, nor were the other ladies often absent. The gentlemen being out, they had in fact nothing to do elsewhere. When the clock struck 3, Elizabeth felt that she must go, and very unwillingly said so. Miss Bingley offered her the carriage, and she only wanted little pressing to accept it, when Jane testified such concern in parting with her that Miss Bingley was obliged to convert the offer of a chaise to an invitation to remain at Netherfield for the present. Elizabeth most thankfully consented, and a servant was dispatched to Longbourn to acquaint the family with her stay and bring back a supply of clothes. So Elizabeth and Jane are each other's support system, as we can kind of see here. Elizabeth comes to her, and she doesn't care if she looks improper. All she cares about is that she gets to see her sister and make sure her sister is safe. That's the only thing she cares about. And think about this. If you had a sister who your mother sent in the rain to get sick. Oh, sing a little song? What little song should I sing? Let me think. We're reading Pride and Prejudice today. We're reading Pride and Prejudice today. I love this story with all my heart. It saved me countless times. We're reading Pride and Prejudice today. Yes, I identify with this book. Yes, it's slightly problematic. Yes, I should probably go get checked up on that. But we're reading Pride and Prejudice today. We're reading Pride and Prejudice today. I kind of want to be in this book, but at the same time, I don't. I think this book should have really been a story about Charlotte and Lizzie moving to a cabin and living alone. I'm not a cottagecore lesbian, but if I was, that'd be great, because that'd be gay, and that is great, and gay is great, and we're happy, and that's good, and let's leave Pride and Prejudice together. Was my song sufficient? I hope my song was sufficient. Thank you. I'm not a very adept singer, but I will try my best every time. Make sure everyone is happy and safe and secure. Yeah. I think it's the only Pride and Prejudice gay song. Oh, I hope someone clipped that. I don't know, someone clipped me talking about the mug. That's been in my family forever, so maybe that got clipped. I guess I'll have to make more Pride and Prejudice gay songs now. Something on my to-do list. But yeah, like, all Jane wants is Lizzie right there. Like, and they are each other's support system. And like, imagine this, like, your sister, your mother kind of like shuts your sister with some absolute strangers who you've only known for a little while, right? Jane is saying, like, they know of these people, but they don't really know these people. Like, Mrs. Bennet is putting a lot of trust in these kind of strangers to look after her child. And, like, that's very, very unsafe. And I think Lizzie realizes how unsafe this is and is like, no, I need to go make sure Jane's okay and they're treating her okay. Because we kind of know these people, but we don't really know them. And, like, a lot of, like, it's very dangerous, especially in this time period, for a woman to be alone in a strange area like this. She doesn't know this house. She doesn't, like, she likes these people, but she doesn't really, really know them. They haven't known them for that long. It's not like they're, like, best friends or something. They're just, like, They've kind of known each other for a couple weeks at this point. It's kind of like being on summer vacation and you just see a couple people and you kind of hang out with them a lot, but you don't really, really know them. Or like being at a summer camp, you know, in a town that's not really your town. You hang out with these people, but you don't really know them. You're just kind of with them. Like, you're with them for allyship, but you don't really, really know. Like, Jane likes Bingley, but she doesn't really know these people too well, and it's a dangerous situation for her to be in. And Bingley could have just easily taken advantage of Jane and raped her. And it wouldn't have, like, there wouldn't have been any repercussions for Bingley. Like, that's the thing. So Lizzie is probably very correct in being paranoid and being like, I need to go make sure my sister is okay. and I don't care how I look or how improper I am. I just need to make sure she's good. Like, that's probably what's going through Lizzie's mind when she does this. And Jane saying, no, stay, is very much like they're each other's support system. And Jane's probably looking for safety. And Elizabeth can probably make sure Jane's gonna be alright. Like, there's safety in numbers, you know? And yeah, that's the thing. Like, and it just kind of puts an even scummier light on Mrs. Bingley and Mr. Bennet, because Mr. Bennet, instead of being concerned for his daughter, is just like, well, if she dies, you know, it's kind of your fault, Mrs. Bingley, Miss Bennet. And that's not really, like, you know, that's not safe or healthy either. So it kind of highlights how much Lizzie and Jane have probably had to be the adults, in a society where women aren't really valued. But they probably have just had to be them. And it's still going to exist today. And again, for the time period, this is actually a nicer family than most families probably were. Parenting, marriage, love, all that stuff in this time period wasn't really great. So this is, you're looking at like the slightly healthier side of it, and that's still not good, you know? Like, I don't really want to end the stream on a negative note, because I think we're going to end the chapter here, because then we're going to move into Netherfield stuff later on. Yeah, but here's the thing. Women weren't taken seriously. So if something happened to Jane and she told people, they would label her a slut. And she would be disgraced. Her reputation would be ruined. Bingley would probably be fine. But Bingley's a man of wealth. He would probably be fine. But if something like that happened to Jane, Jane wouldn't have been that fine. Like, at this point in this time period, even if something were to happen to her and they were the primary suspects, they have wealth, they have money, and Jane's a woman, and women aren't people, really, according to society at this time. They don't have a status. Like, that's the reality that they're living in. So Lizzie's probably very aware of this reality and wants to go make sure her sister is okay. And even by today's standards, if I found out my sister, like, my parents had just shoved my sister into kind of like a random guy's house, I would go make sure they were okay. Like, I would go try to be like, are you okay? Like, I would call them, try to reach out to them, go get them. I would just be like, this is not a safe situation. Like, when I know about it, I'm like, this doesn't seem like a safe situation. Because even today, by today's standards, it's still really dicey. And as an older sibling, you gotta look out for your younger siblings. We may have our differences, we may be a dysfunctional family, but nobody hurts my sisters. So, like, you know, like, Lizzie's probably very concerned. Are you mooing, Maple? Are you mooing? She's dreaming. She makes noises when she dreams. You want to come say hi? No? Maybe? Okay. She's sniffing to see if I have food. I don't have food. She's not going to get up. She's like, no, I don't want to move. Maple's got her priorities in order. Maple, this dog, if you need a D&D example of neutral, this is the dog for that. She is the D&D equivalent of the neutral alignment. She does what she wants to do, and she doesn't really do anything else unless something majorly interferes with her way of life. This dog sleeps through the vacuum. You can vacuum around this dog and she doesn't budge. She's gonna continue sleeping. She wants to sleep. That's all she's gonna do. She's the definition of the neutral alignment. It has to majorly interfere with her way of life for her to give a frick. Just Maple, definition of the neutral alignment. Nope, not chaotic neutral, just neutral. She wants to sleep. She's going to do everything in her power to continue sleeping, and something has to majorly mess with that for her to give a frick. What are you doing? Am I talking about you? Am I talking about you? Is the other dog getting food and attention and you're not? Maple, it's okay. I'm over here. Hey. 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 She doesn't give a frick about what I have to say. Maple! Over here! Hi! Yes, hello! Hello! She's 10. She's probably losing her hearing a bit. She also is just kind of oblivious. Yeah. But we will continue our evening streams of Pride and Prejudice. Maybe not tomorrow because I'm streaming WoW, which is gonna be a shit show tomorrow. I'm going back to that game for a bit. I was gonna do it for Throwback Thursday, but I was in a lot of pain on Thursday and I couldn't do it. So I just kind of pushed it back to Sunday. But in the future, Throwback Thursday will be games that I played in my childhood. And Sunday and Tuesday will probably be more like Final Fantasy streams or whatever for the Horde. I mean, I am playing on Horde. I'm playing a Blood Elf Paladin DPS, but I like that I have the option to be a tank or healer if needed. I have not played the game in literal years, so I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. But it is nice to be back. And then I'm playing a Drawny Paladin on the Alliance side, just to keep things very simple and very coherent, and I also like my sexy space goat. But I want to get the Horde out of the way so I can, like, farm Mother. I do like Death Knight as well. I just wanted a bit more survivability because I am kind of returning to the game, so I need a heal spell. And also, I main healer in Final Fantasy. So in Final Fantasy, I main healer or like caster DPS. But in World of Warcraft, I really like the way that melee DPS feels. And Paladin is a very good like survivability, but you get the melee DPS feel and you get the kind of healer feel kind of combined into one. And that's been very good for me. I've been enjoying that. I'm not far into the game and I'm playing on a European server. So that's a little different. One of my friends plays on a European server. Dancer and Summoner. Summoner is my favorite. I love the reworks they did for Summoner. Yeah, Summoner is my favorite. I did the rework. I love the reworks they did for Summoner. I actually in my Twitch links it should have I have an Orzian Glamour collection page, so I make glamours if you ever want to check those out. Copy them, improve them, whatever. But yeah. So but yes, I like the new Summoner reworks. I mean, a book and dragons. What more is there to ask for in life? I don't know if paladins are hybrid class. I know that if I switch schematics, I can be... I know if I switch schematic, like if I switch what I... Yeah, mix between cleric and fighter. That does kind of sum up paladin. I'm playing a DPS though, paladin. Which, yeah, it is kind of like that. Yeah, I need something with a heal spell because I'm not super efficient at the game yet. Also, like, I don't have any add-ons currently in WoW because I'm a little worried about malware. So, I'm not playing with any add-ons at the moment, but if anyone knows any good add-ons, please let me know. Because I know that WoW is better with add-ons. Yeah. Yeah, so I will be playing WoW tomorrow, a little earlier in the day, but I might do another evening stream on Monday. This is gonna kind of be like an impromptu thing. I just kind of wanted to do something because I was so sick this week that I wanted to do something kind of chill to just hang out, relax, read a good book, and also just like, I know that it's very beneficial for a lot of people to be read to, and I know that a lot of people receive a lot of enjoyment from being read to, and I know that something like Jane Austen or Agatha Christie or Sherlock Holmes can be very clunky and hard to understand. And because I have read it a lot and I've done a lot of research on it, I figured I may as well try to simplify it a little bit just to make it a little easier for people to understand and we can just have a good time at it. And I also really like to analyze things because that's how my PTSD-ridden brain works. Yeah. So, yeah, I really want to continue doing this. There's a lot of books in the public domain. I think maybe after this, you know, if enough people want it, maybe I'll read some Miss Marple and we can get into some Miss Marple murder mysteries. Those are a little shorter, which might be better. Can read some more Jane Austen. We'll see. See if there's some other books in the public domain. If I can get away with reading books that aren't in the public domain, Oh boy, do I have a lot of goodies we can get into. Do I have a lot of goodies. We gotta read the Phantom Tollbooth actually might be in the public domain, but after this we are definitely reading the Phantom Tollbooth. Oh my god. And the Weston game. Yeah, I think it can also be, there are studies, so my mom's a neuroscientist. She works at in the, like, UCSF type system. So I've been around, like, brain scans and, like, brain imaging research my entire life. My entire life, I've looked at, like, brains and MRIs. Okay, so I have a different, like, but, my family's very scientific-y in nature. But, there are a lot of studies that show listening to someone read to you is very beneficial for your mental health. And I want to contribute to that. So I'm contributing to that in my own way. So yeah, listening to someone read to you can be very, very beneficial for your mental health. And, oh really? They are? Okay, that's cool. I was, when I was in 3rd grade, there was one one of those, like, Goosebumps books, and one of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books. And then there was this very outdated book of plays that I read, like, front to back all the time. Yeah. But, yeah, like, I think the Phantom Tollbooth might be in the public domain, but it's so old, I don't think I'd get copyright for it. The Weston game's gotta be in the public domain now. Oh my god, the Weston game is so good. It's you know, it's also a very old kind of mystery book. It's a mystery book too, but not a lot of people know about it, and that's sad. So I might read the Weston game. If I can get away with it, I'm going to read What We Found Under the Sofa and How It Saved the World. I need to get it back from my cousins though. So yes, I am very happy to be in the Twitch book domain now. That was very nice that everyone found me. So I will do my best to make sure that this gets done. We might do one Monday evening, because again, tomorrow I'm doing game stuff. And then on Tuesday I'm doing game stuff. Tuesdays are kind of condensed for me. Maybe Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening might be really good, actually, too. So yeah, the lighting's going to be different for game stuff. I tried to make the lighting look cozy for reading. Oh, yeah, you should go to bed! Well, okay, I'm going to end my stream anyway, so you should go to bed, though. Get some sleep. Always take care of yourself, man. Alright. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. Eat cake, because the more you weigh, the harder you are to kidnap. And I want you to stay around. Have a good mental health for the rest of your week. And hit me up if you need anything on Discord, Instagram, wherever. Alright. Have a glorious, wonderful night. Sweet dreams, everyone.